Falky.
Hey, how's it going?
What's going on? Wait, everyone, welcome to BRAP. Sorry we're late. I went down a rabbit hole. I was reading some news related items about the economy, specifically the US economy and tariffs, by the way, Falky.
Oh, isn't that a fun subject, man? I
Oh
could go
my
on days
I
about the
mean,
permutations of that.
I have Elon, seeing Elon Musk talk about how, government spending is leading to inflation. I'm like, okay, Elon, I pump the brakes. I know government spending can cause inflation, but it's not the only thing that can cause inflation. You, in
No,
fact, can have less government spending, a balanced government budget, and still have inflation because of impacts to the
yeah,
supply chain and some other things.
if it you can actually use government spending to lessen inflation if you spend in the right areas and
This is true.
subsidize in the right zones, and do it whilst being balanced. It's oh man, it's I honestly sitting back here. And with the issues that we have in our country about high energy prices, but man, it's drama. You can't stop watching it. It is just fascinating drama.
What is the perspective, by the way, Falky? Because I'm sorry, hold on just a sec here.
You're right.
I got to turn my mic up a little bit. What is the perspective of people? I say people. I'm sorry, I don't want to say people. What is the perspective of Australia? What of what's happening of Australians and what's happening in the U.S. right now? I'm
Uh,
just
it,
curious.
it it depends on where in Australia you sit and what your individual perspectives are. But there's like a subset, or say subset. There's a group of people, of individuals in Australia, who are hopeful that the silliness, or the removal of the silliness that
Yeah,
has crept
yeah.
in, uh,
Okay.
that that erodes, and we get back to what's factually important to people being safe and healthy and happy and prosperous and all the rest of it. Then there's this other side of, well,
Yeah,
what he's proposing in certain circumstances makes sense, but the way they're going about it, thank Christ it's not happening here. But then we've got our
yeah,
own set of, you know, potential issues of the flow-on
yeah.
effect of, they're pulling out the World Health Organization, they're chasing this and challenging that, and well, where does Australia fit in, the strategic ally and all the rest of that sort of stuff? So there's a lot of upside. There's a lot of upside to be taken from it, but there's also a lot of turmoil to get there. So I think the stuff that goes on in the UK and whatnot makes it a bit more of a, well, thank goodness one's going that way and we're not both going in that direction. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I think we need to sort of, shouldn't say let it ride, but see what happens between now and the end of March. The US Fed said, "Oh, we're not going to shift rates. We've got too much uncertainty." I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that factor into that. We're looking at potential interest rate cuts over here because of how our domestic issues are sorting out, but international pressures are putting on it. It'll be, if they cut out $1 trillion, $2 trillion worth of government spending that they think they're going to get, that's not a bad thing, but that'll push the unemployment rate up, which will take pressure off wage inflation. That's not a bad thing if you're paying interest rates on a home loan, but it's not a good thing if you suddenly find yourself needing a job and there's more competition. So suppressing wages is, there's positives and negatives there. The tariff thing, I can see where the sensibility and I shouldn't say the sensibility. I can see where the strategy comes into that and how it can be applied that um, would force the issue that he wants to force. At the same time, there's not a lot of day-to-day items that would be impacted initially by some of those tariffs. Especially if energy is excluded from them. So the impact it would have on inflation is negligible, but that means that it's not going to have a downward impact on it either. It's more the your consumer electronic spending and a few other bits and pieces. Like it's all over the board. But the idea of having no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, which allows people to have more money to spend, should increase the collections in the state and the federal tax for sales taxes. If they don't increase those rates, they'll just naturally get a benefit from people spending more or having more money to spend. So that will then trigger, positive indices around consumer spending and consumer sentiment, all that sort of stuff, which will trend in a direction that, will make the economic outlook look good, but it's almost a falsely applying a positive to a situation. If you're manipulating one part of the metric and not the other part, then of course you can manipulate to get a positive outcome. Is it actually a positive outcome though? Who knows? Usually when a market knows there's more money being spent in that market, prices tend to go up. So,
well, I mean, that's the point. The introduction of, to your point about suppressing income. I mean, I'm not a proponent of it, but the less dollars you have in the market, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the whole point of shifting interest rates up is and it doesn't work in today's age where home ownership is, in the 80s, 90s, home ownership was 80, 90%, own and occupy. So if you wanted people to spend less money out in the broader market, you crank the interest rates up so they had less money to spend. That curves down the inflation. The amount of people who don't own occupy now is insane. It's lower than 50% owner occupy. So the amount of people that are paying higher interest rates for a house that they don't live in, that they're renting out, well, they just naturally just pass it straight through to the renters. So the renters are now having to pay these astronomically higher rents in like Western world housing problems everywhere. They've got less money to discretionary spend. So the people that are supposed to be getting hammered to slow down the spending are just passing it through. It's not impacting them, and they've got a bundle load of money they can borrow against. And they wonder why the last 6 months the interest rate hikes have had to go higher than they thought to even get any result out of it.
And what's really maddening to the Fed right here in the U.S. is that consumer spending is actually still pretty good here in the U.S. We had positive GDP growth, so it's like, okay, if
because they're not spending borrowed money. In the late 80s and 90s, it was go and get a credit card and spend your heart's content to keep the thing rolling.
I remember the savings and loan scandals of the 80s, but
oh man, those were nuts. These days, no one wants a credit card. They do not want to spend debt. They don't want to accumulate debt to spend it on consumer items. They'll accumulate debt to buy assets and investments, but they will not spend money that they don't already own.
I don't even use credit. Fuck, I don't even use credit cards anymore.
Yeah, and it's not a common thing now.
I use my Amex Gold card because I get points. It's not a credit card, it's a charge card. And I get lots of points from American Express, and then I just pay it off at the end of the month. Pay it off.
Easy.
That's it.
And because there's no credit cards. There's not this accumulation of debt for consumer spending, but the consumer spending staying high. Well, the other side of that balance is just not happening, where they're spending savings. Well, but they're not spending all their savings. And as I said before, those that have got assets that are doing all this spending. So even the young generation now, who they millennials, Gen Zs, and they not millennials. What is it, Gen Alpha? Whatever the current generation. They're hooked onto their phones. They don't want to work. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. Yeah, but they're sensible enough to not be in debt to their eyeballs like us millennials and some Gen Xers were put into, with the notion of borrow the money and pay it back over your lifetime and you'll be fine. And the Gen Zs hate debt as well. So they don't do consumer debt, but they're happy to try and buy a house and get up to the gills in debt to own an asset. The Gen Alphas, they don't want to touch it at all. So they will only spend what they've earned. But because they don't have these big overhead things that they're paying for, because they're mostly living at home and they're mostly living in very cheap living circumstances, they don't have all these massive bills to pay. They're predominantly not incurring massive amounts of student loan debt now because that all got forgiven. What are they going to do with their money? They will save some, they'll spend the rest.
All right, I want to welcome.
Consumer spending's not coming down, but anyway.
Yeah, Falky, I could talk economics, the U.S. economy with you for days. It's a fascinating. I'm just curious to see how the tariffs are going to play out. When I saw tariffs on semiconductor chips, I think I said this to Hamp earlier today. I want to welcome Game Logic to the show. What's up, Logic? And so I think I said this to you, Logic. Look, Falky, I'm living the American dream, man. I just got a 3/4 ton pickup truck. to haul my 33-foot travel trailer. But I said, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen with rates. So I'm going to get in right now. Actually, I did that last time when I purchased my SUV, which I just traded in. And I timed it perfect last time. I got in my last vehicle and like a month later, the rates went up. So, you never semiconductor chips, maybe the Fed tries to raise rates again. Who knows what's going to happen? But anyhow, I know people aren't here to listen us talk about inflation, economics, tariffs, and the lot. So we'll get to the gaming conversation here. Logic, I do like your Call of Daddy Parental Warzone shirt. That's actually pretty funny, man.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Logic, how are you today, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing well. No Johnny Walker Blue tonight.
Nope. I had 2 last night. That's $100 right there for 2 drinks. So I think I'll be good for a little bit.
I hear you, man. I do want to welcome Doomsayer, who's kind enough to join us. Sent me a DM. Doomsayer, this is your first time on the show. Welcome to BRAP, sir.
I appreciate you giving me the link and everything, and me jumping on with you fine gentlemen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, by the way, I love all the game memorabilia you have. The dread poster I love, by the way.
That's actually signed by Carl Urban too.
Is it really?
My sister, she goes, my sister lives in Texas, and she goes to like all the Comic-Cons and horror conventions and that. Like, you can't really see it, but like, what is it? I have Vincent D'Onofrio signature, Punisher, Daredevil, Karate Kid. She goes to all these things in Texas, so she gets all this memorabilia that she just sends it to me. I'm like, all right, now what the hell do I do with it all? So it's a lot of years of collecting.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I love the man cave, by the way. It's awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's you got to have the man cave these days. I feel like I don't know, Falk, if you have a man cave, but if you don't have one,
as you can see by the blank wall behind me.
No, is that a suit? Are those suitcases behind you? I thought I saw.
Yeah, there's a couple stacked up out the back behind me. We're just moving stuff around the house. We're shifting a few things about at the moment, so a bit of chaos and settling in after the Christmas break, and yeah.
If David needs some stuff, I can send him a load of stuff. I got all kinds of posters and everything, man.
I don't want anything more. I want to get a heap of shit out of this house.
Send me all my McFarlane stuff too, all my McFarlane toys.
Hey, you know what? Speaking of McFarlane, I have a McFarlane Assassin's Creed poster, and right here, this is I don't know if you can see this. This is Titanfall. This is Titanfall, and this is a McFarlane Titanfall poster that he did.
Oh wow!
Yeah, let me see if I can adjust the camera there.
Yo, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
David, you got to keep up, man. I'll help you out. Like I said, I got plenty of stuff. I don't know if it's ever going to arrive in Australia, but
Hey, we've spoken about this before. You tried to send. Doom once tried to send me a $25 item, and it was going to cost him over $150 to ship it to Australia.
Oh my God.
Just with Retro, I was trying to send Retro a bunch of equipment so he would have podcast stuff. 3 times, Northern Ireland kept on sending it back because it wouldn't go through customs. It was $90 a pop. I'm like, Retro, I got to stop right now. So, but hey, BRAP, I really appreciate this though.
No, absolutely, man. No, I'm glad you could make it. Appreciate you hitting me up on DM. Some of the live chats said, what do they say? Logic, your shirt. I thought it said, "Call me daddy." That is actually pretty funny. But anyhow, I do want to go to what everyone's playing right now. I'll be the first to admit I didn't get any gaming in this week, unfortunately, because it was so busy. And then today I was off work. I went out, traded in my SUV for a truck. So that kept me busy all day, and hopefully get some gaming in this weekend. Fingers crossed. I just been really busy, but so I'm not gonna. The last game that I was playing was Metaphor Refantasia, which I feel like I've been on playing for a long time. Didn't get to Ninja Gaiden 2, which was disappointment because I downloaded it, but I haven't played it yet. And that was something I was really looking forward to playing through Game Pass. But I'll go to you first, Doomsayer. What are you currently playing right now?
Well, I platinumed all 3 Mass Effect games, so I was able to get that done last weekend. And then I played Swarm. It's an indie game. It's like a real cheap. I platinumed that, but the one I did play was Geometry Survivor. It's roguelike or road light or whatever the term is. It's just basically all these shapes, and you're just trying to keep alive for 20 straight minutes. And that's basically it. I had a great time with it. It took me about 5 hours to platinum it, but I mean, I had a great time with it. It was only $3, so I'm like a cheapskate, gamer and everything. So
Hey, no, not hey, enjoy what you enjoy, right? Nothing wrong with that. What about you, Falky? Are you what are you playing these days?
I'm still, I shouldn't say I'm still stuck. So I finished off Forged in Shadows Torch, and I love those games, but geez, I suck at them. But I enjoyed that one. That one was fun. I had a crack at the platinum. I just don't have the hand-eye coordination for the advanced combat stuff. So that stopped me from getting the platinum, but I had a great time with that game. I thought it was, for studio's first crack, I thought that was brilliant. So finished that one up, rolled credits on it. Still playing Lost Judgment, finding that one. That one's sort of touching close to home a bit with the storyline in that, as every Yakuza game that I've played, or Yakuza spin-off game as I've played does. I find those stories very, very pertinent and still very current, even though it's a few years old, that one. Still trying to get Dave the Diver finished when I can, and I've started playing Anno Mutationum as what I'm playing on my PS Portal when I'm parked on the couch and the wife's watching her TV shows with her friends.
Can I ask a real quick question? How's everybody get away with that?
With what?
Being able to sit there and play your handheld, and the wife is happy. I am not allowed to do that.
It's the theory behind it is
it's an Australian accent.
Don't be in their line of sight, and make sure what they've got on TV is some trashy crap that you don't get interested in, that they absolutely have to watch, like the Kardashians or Catfish or something like that. That's the secret. It has to be something they're absolutely enthralled and they have to watch, and you just stay out of their line of sight. And if you're in the background, nice and quiet, no problems.
Falky, you
No.
you're gonna get some
there. They want you there to be with them, but they don't want to have to deal with you. That's
so if you get up and leave, it's like where are you going?
Yeah, just quietly in the background, and you're all good.
Yeah. All right. Let me get this $2 super chat here. Warwana out to $2 super chat says, hit the like button and sub if you haven't already. Thank you for that, Warwana. Appreciate it. Game Logic. What are you playing? I could probably guess, but please share with the audience.
Yep. So I've been grinding away at Call of Duty Season 2. Started on Monday, so I've been into it since the beginning. And then last night, today, I loaded up a few flight simulators and stuff on the RTX, on the box with the RTX 4080 in it, and that's hooked up to the 43-inch 1440p display. So tonight I actually took a break from Call of Duty and played some Ace Combat 7 on PC. So good times there.
Awesome, man. How is COD these days? Are you entangled with the sweaties? Anybody doing the bunny hop stuff?
Yeah, lots of people. Yeah, it's been and I don't know whether I'm assuming, I guess, I don't know. I mean, people who know COD in and out better than I do, know better than I do. I think the SBMM bracket that I'm playing in is higher than it used to be. I think partially because now I only play with the weapons that I like since Modern Warfare, definitely since Black Ops Cold War. My KD was like just a little below 1. Usually it was usually like 0.91, 0.95. I spent a ton of time playing sniper rifles, trying to level pistols and shotguns, right? Which for me, when I play, is just always, you always have to take a small map, and it's just always just like a high attrition map. You're just running around doing whatever you got to do to level weapons. But this year, since the last season of Modern Warfare 3, I was like, forget it. I'm done trying to level like every single weapon. I'm only playing with the weapons that I like, so I typically only play with assault rifles, SMGs, and marksman rifles. I've started playing a little bit more with shotguns on small, since they brought the face-off style maps back. In LMGs, I play with LMGs regularly. So assault rifles, SMGs, LMGs, a little bit with marksman rifles, and just started recently playing with shotguns. So my KD this year is up at like 1.3 on average, and then it's dropped a little. It's dropped a little to like 1.25 because, like I said, I started playing with shotguns. So it's interesting and nice in the stats. At least this year, I don't know if they've been doing this in the past, but because they brought back kind of prestige, I guess the way that it used to work, they show you your stats each prestige level. So you can see your overall KD, and then you can see what your KD was per prestige level. So in past years, I always felt like I would, there were hills and valleys right in my KD, because I could definitely see the times that I was spending working shotguns and pistols, because my KD would be like lower than the average. But I was like, I really wish it would show like your most recent KD or something like that. So at least this year you have some insight into it. But yeah, I've been having a good time. COD is, it always what it is. But yes, because I think I'm playing in a higher SPMM bracket, I'm seeing a lot. I'm running into squads a lot more on comms, and I'm running a lot more into movement kitties, and just people like doing things like camping on face-off maps. I'm like, where like the map is only like 15 feet by 15 feet anyway. People are still camping.
Hey, man,
so
you gotta camp those corners, man.
right.
And lay prone.
Can I ask, what the hell is a sweat?
So a sweaty is a term I think a lot of people use, but also we use a lot for just a try hard, like somebody who's just like, we're not playing ranked, we're playing, I mean, it's, but then there are some people who it's like you encounter them and you try to shoot them, and they're like it's like fighting Spider-Man, it's
Right.
just, they're just whacked out, crouching on the ground, jumping, diving in different directions, and you're like, come on, bro. Like, I'm not about to sit here and dump like 500 joules just on this one gunfight, right, between you and me. I got a whole match to get through.
Fair enough. I heard the term thrown around in Fortnite the other week, and I was like, what the hell is a sweat?
Sweaties, yeah.
And I was
Sweaties.
like, this stuff, and I'm like, the wife said something about sweaties, and she's talking about like giving me a debrief of her session. I was like, what? You're allowed to teabag again, or what's going on here? I couldn't figure out what she meant.
Yeah, I don't think my kids my 10-year-old plays Fortnite. I don't think has ever used the word sweaty. He does say like things like, they're using aimbot. I'm like, nah, dude, you just ran up against a sweaty. That's not aimbot, dude. You're just getting worked. He's like, oh no, I'm not. I'm like, nah, you are. Trust me, you're getting wrecked right now. So
is if you're not doing it competitively, is using aimbots cheating in COD?
Yes.
As far as I think my controversial take is, in my opinion, so is quick scoping. Like, the fact that is still in the game after like a decade is just ridiculous, in my personal opinion.
I love quick scoping.
I always hated that.
I love it.
Duty.
I love quick. I love it.
Is Call of Duty got friendly fire?
It does in ranked.
Right.
Wait. Not necessarily ranked. It does in hardcore.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
because that I keep coming back to the point that Helldivers 2 has friendly fire on from scratch, and it creates some of the funniest and funnest outcomes when you just go legging it across the map, and all of a sudden someone starts mowing down the opposition, and you can cop it. And I keep saying, imagine if they had friendly fire in Fortnite or in COD. Just the amount of devastation it would cause would be insane.
Yeah, I've always felt like it doesn't make. I mean, because what it does is it hurts you. I think because I think the way it works. Somebody mentioned in here said at the same time I did that only on hardcore. So Chad Stud might know better than I do, but I think it counts against like your kill count in a match. So if you do too much of it, it's going to hurt your own KD. So it's not as impactful. Rainbow Six having friendly fire, Rainbow Six Siege, I feel like is something that's like impactful, right? Because you only have one life per round, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody friendly kills you there, right, your squad is down one, and then you're up against the opposition. So it's a little more punishing there. But in COD, I feel like it's in hardcore, it's not as impactful.
I imagine there's a few teammates that you'd like to walk up behind and shoot in the back of the head for how they're performing, though.
Oh, David, you never played Helldivers with my son. Just ask Retro about that.
I've heard.
You heard?
You should hear the stuff when way back when 12 months ago, when it was 10 months ago, when we were all in the throes of playing Helldivers 2 had just come out, and we're all into it. And Retro and I were just daily getting into it with the rest of the people that we were playing with. It was not uncommon because I'd sort of take the Overwatch. Early days, I was horrible with the shotgun and too tight to pay for the war bond. So I'd just get the big machine gun and I'd perch up on an elevated point, and I would just sort of do Overwatch in the crew. And Retro would just run up behind me and shoot me just for fun. I'd be sitting there, bang, there you go. Or I would be legging it from point to point, and then all of a sudden we'd get an engagement, and then they just start launching nukes or dropping bombs and all this. And then, just figuring out where you needed to be. Like the amount of carnage that we caused each other by just mowing it. Like I'd be running and he'd be shooting, trying to catch me. It was just, it turned into a game itself between Retro and I, just trying to see how many times we could kill each other before we got back to the dropship. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm diverting the conversation. We're talking about COD. We're not talking about Helldivers. Anyway, sorry.
I'm sorry, guys. Give me a second here. I'm trying to pull something up here. You guys can continue talking. I'm just.
You got to be careful. You're going to end up causing burns and irritations. You keep yanking on it that hard.
That's not what I'm doing.
Wait a minute. We're not on Wise's show. Come on, David. Give that a break, because it was after you left, it was getting bad. It was just getting bad.
Yeah, I think it's best if we just don't
approach
that subject at the moment. Yeah. But anyway,
sorry, Logic too. Sorry, to give you some that bad news too. So sorry. Go ahead, David.
How's it going? Sorry, I'm going to ask the question. How is season 2 going? Are they with COD? Have they got the engagement still? Is it still a good place is the game as good as it was expected to be? How are you finding it?
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, and again, older COD player, right? So I just don't have the same perspective as, a 20-something, right, who's playing the game, or a college kid. So, I'm sure they have their own opinions. The Fortnite crowd, right? So I'm fine with it. It's a question, I've been asking myself the question over the last few years, whether or not other things outside the mainstream of multiplayer have gotten less interesting, or the core gameplay has just become interesting enough, right? It's one of those flip sides of the coin. I used to, when I really got interested in it at Black Ops Cold War, I would play hardcore. Like I said, the face-off maps were there. I would play gunfight. There were lots of different modes that I would play. Then as I got interested in actually progression and my stats, one of the things I just stopped doing, and I've gotten really bad about it now, is I stopped playing the objective-based stuff. because I got really tired of me going in actually trying to play the objective, but constantly being with people who were concerned about their KD, and so they'd never played the objective, right? So you would go into these matches, like one of the most frustrating things I would have is, again, and I don't consider myself a good player. I'm a mid-pack player, which was kind of the reason I kind of agreed with myself to stay when I came back, because I used to be a below mid-pack player, and the game just wasn't fun. So I was like, look, I just want to be the person who doesn't come in last every round, right? Once I achieve that, then I'm willing to stick with it. But like, one of the most frustrating things is I would play kill confirmed, and I would have a ton of kills, or I would be high on the leaderboard on my team, and then we would still lose. Right. And we would, me and the other people in the top of the leaderboard, on my team would have scored significantly higher, more kills than the other team. And I'm like, guys, like, there's no way in the world we scored like 1.5 times the number of kills that they did, but we still lose. You guys aren't picking up tags. So, and kill confirmed it's not domination. It's not hardcore. Jesus Christ. You just have to pick up the tags of the person that you killed. Right. That's where it got. That, to me, even of the scale of just shady players, right? That's like the shadiest, and it gets really frustrating. And so then I evolved to this point where I was like, look, I get that there's objective play, but when I'm trying to level guns, I'm like, I'm just going around to get kills. Like, I don't care that it's like I'm playing domination on shipment because it's a small map. I got to level this shotgun. I don't really care about taking an objective, right? I'm just going to run around, kill as many people as I can. It gives you an advantage to a certain extent, because there are people who are focused on playing the objective. So you get a ton of people clumped on a domination point, right? And you can score kills that you just keep running laps around the map. I will admit, this year, certain playlists I have in my filter still put me in domination and hard point matches, even though I'm not really trying to. But I will put into my filter 10v10 mosh pit, or when they have a map on rotation and the rotation includes objective based modes. I'm like, okay, like I don't choose domination and hardpoint, but if domination, hardpoint are a subset within a map filter in rotation, I wind up getting domination and hardpoint every once in a while. And now I'm just like, yeah, I don't care anymore about the objectives. I'm like, I'm just gonna go around and get kills. So I've now become one of those people. Yeah, I think it's going fairly decently. The LTM that they've put in is an LTM called I think it's called Overdrive, which is to me it's analogous to it's similar to when they had the Die Hard mode in Black Ops Cold War, when they had the Bruce Willis skin in there. And in Die Hard mode, it was like you had to score a certain number of kills, like per minute or per few seconds. And then, like, if you didn't, then like a countdown timer started. And if the countdown timer expired, then you would blow up. So it's kind of it's kind of like the reverse of that. And so once you rack up a certain number of kills within a certain amount of time, then like your reloads become faster. The other thing that's actually kind of neat is that when you score a kill for a split second, you can see all the enemies on the map and where they are. They get a red outline, and so you can see them even when they're behind objects. So, if you play it right, and if they're all clumped together, and if they're all transiting, and so it kind of helps a little bit when you're up against squads who are on comms, because when you pop one, if they're all moving around as a group, then they blip right in your field of view, and if they're all clumped together, then you know where the next 5 guys are. So it's pretty neat mode. Haven't been super impressed by the 3 new maps that they've added. I'm not crazy about Dealership. I'm not crazy about, I can't remember what it's called, but there's like a high-rise building that has a lot of verticality to it, actually. But there's just a few lanes where like they come around the corner and they're overlooking. It's the opposite thing is a staircase that goes down, and then 2 like overhead lighting fixtures that you can take off from the top of the staircase and hit these lighting fixtures and actually bound like across space or across air, basically, to get to the other side. And that is just a funnel of deadly fire. Like it's almost like a sniper lane, and just just tons of kills happen there. But it also grinds down like fluidity of gameplay. There's one other one, I can't remember what it is right off the top of my head, that I do actually like. But yeah, I mean, I think they find there's some UI stuff that I'm not really crazy about, but season 2 itself is fine. It's maybe not quite as exciting as season 1, but I figure what they do now is they do the season, but then they halfway through they do the season whatever rebooted, and then they inject new maps and some new LTMs and LTEs. So that should maybe it'll pick up then.
Cool.
All right,
I'm really pleased to
yeah.
hear that you're enjoying it, and then that it's controversial comment coming for some who don't understand what I'm trying to say, but it's really good to hear that they didn't stuff this one up as bad as it could have gone. That they actually delivered something, and that's heartwarming to a degree. But yeah, it's really encouraging to hear that they didn't throw this one in the back of the shed and hope for the best. So
yeah, Chad said, "Ask Game Legend, do you have a good win-loss record?" No, Chad said my win-loss record is worse than my KD. I never play. I mean, it's rare that I actually play with people. If Slow-Mo were here, he would give me a ration of crap and call me out on stream. So because like everybody who's my friend is better at the game than I am, what winds up happening is like when I play with Slow-Mo and Forte, like in these guys, I get up bracketed SBMM wise. And then I just do horrible because I'm playing against people who are like way better than I am normally. But regardless, even when I do play, I'm playing by myself. I'm not on comms. I do not have the chat on because it's so toxic. So it's just me playing with a bunch of randos, and just you get, like Nuketown, right? Like my big thing about Nuketown tactically is Nuketown is really to me is a matter of controlling lanes, right? So you got to control the lane. The 2 lanes between the buses and the house, and then the lane between the 2 buses, and then the 2 lanes down the side. And like there many is the time that you get match made with people on your team who nobody is focused on controlling lanes. Lots of them are always going like the same place. I'm like, guys, we don't need 3 people going down one side. Like that doesn't make any sense. And then same thing with, then so many times me getting into matches where like nobody's trying to actually capture the domination points or the hard points. So my win-loss record is like a 0.86 or something like that. Again, largely because I'm playing with randos, and half the time none of them actually care about winning the match.
All right. I do want to go to just something I came across here on the Twitter timeline. This is a tweet from Paris. The sooner PlayStation can get their games, and I'm bringing this up because there were some issues with the Spider-Man 2 port. You got like a 45.
again, aren't we?
I knew this was gonna get Falky a little. It's Paris is funny because he just says some shit sometimes. I'm like, but you got to add a little more nuance to this. There's
nuance doesn't pay the bills for him or the other idiots that make these comments. They're just engagement farming.
Well. So, but this is kind of interesting because the Spider-Man 2 port came out on PC, and wasn't it 45? Had like a 45% of like Steam reviewers or users were like thumbs down, and actually they just released a patch for it. So there were some performance issues with the Spider-Man 2 port, which is unfortunate because I believe the first Spider-Man game that was on PC, I think that port was okay if I memory serves me correct. Logic is not.
Yeah, Miles Morales and the first Spider-Man port were awesome. And I kind of wish Slow-Mo was here because he's better at like knowing that. I'm pretty sure this port was also done by Nix's, so I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's sorry. The Nix's did this port. From what I'm understanding, they hit similar issues to a previous one they did. Which one was the other one they did? Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart hit PC and it had these issues in it as well. It's something to do with the engine that they've used to do this, because it's the updated version. So Miles Morales and the original Spider-Man were on the old version, So they did a heap of tweaking to get it. They had to take it a long way to get it up to spec. The new engine has got some quirk in it where it doesn't come across to certain levels at the low and mid range as good as it should. But again, they're really pushing to get these things out on timelines because they need the cash. So I think it'll get specced and sorted, but yeah.
So, Paris says the sooner PlayStation get their games day and date on PC with cross progression enabled, the better. I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. Yeah, I don't know why some people are just hard pressed for PlayStation to do this, and I often wonder if it's because perhaps their platform of choice is doing it, so they feel like, oh well, PlayStation should do it too. But there are reasons why Sony's not doing their games day and date on PC, at least the single player games, right? We've talked about it on this show. Falky, you took off your glasses earlier, and you were just like, "So what was that, Falky? What?"
I
Talk to me. What was that about?
I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah.
The frustration is around the disingenuous nature that these sort of tweets are, and how they're just doing it specifically to use doom scrolling engagement to get engagement to pay their bills. And so this like the sooner PlayStation get their games day and date on PC with cross progression enabled, the better. Why do they need to do that? There is no business driver for them to do that. And then they go, oh look, Spider-Man PC sales didn't do great on day one. Why does it need to do 7 or 8 or 10 million on day one on PC? It doesn't. It's on PC for sale. They're selling it at $50. The original Spider-Man 2 came out at $70 18 months ago, whatever it was. If they did day and date and cross progression, people aren't going to buy it on both systems. They'll buy it on one or the other. And if it's open to PC on launch date, it'll get ripped and pirated, and there will be a desire for people to just not pay for it. It will have an impact on sales. But as it stands, if you did them day and date with cross progression, Sony misses out on the revenue from the secondary sale on PC 12, 18 months later, which is actually more valuable when you factor in the time value of money of selling it at that price at that point later. They wouldn't be able to sell it at $70 on PlayStation and $50 on PC on the same day. They would have to say $70 across the board. Straight away, PC gamers are going to get disadvantaged, and a lot of people aren't really going to buy it there. But there's the cost of putting it on PC initially. Then they have to develop it for PC and as part of their build-up. There's all these back-end things that people just don't factor in, let alone what part of PC are they moving this thing to. Don't forget, Spider-Man 2 was not built to go to PC originally. It was built to be on a PlayStation 5. So, and they've done the upgrades for the Pro, and now they've swapped it out, converted over to PC, and they're having problems with it. And problem solving these things is not easy, and it is not cheap. I don't understand why there's this desire to say they have to get there soon because they have to. They don't. Look at their financials the last 2 quarters. Look at what's in the tea leaves. So the share price is doing really, really well. They know that the third quarter, the December quarter financials are coming, and in the last week and a half, the share price has bounced pretty well. So the news is getting out there that that their quarter results are going to be good for those who have the connections. There's no need for them to change what they're doing because the evidence that it will be detrimental, aka look at what happens with Xbox and others that go multiple platforms that are platform holders. The evidence that says it's going to be detrimental is pretty strong. PlayStation doesn't have a need to do this. They don't even have a want to do this for a lot of their titles. Because why would, single player game that traditionally don't sell highly on PC anyway, what's the benefit of bastardizing or cannibalizing your console based sale point? Because it will have an effect of pissing off console players, and they will wait until it gets cheaper. Because they'll go, well, I've nothing to do with it here. They'll just wait until it gets cheaper over there. And then that factor of I got to have it day one and the hype factor around that generates a lot of this revenue and sales out of it. There's no business driver for them to do this. So for a commentator to sit back and say, hey, they need to do this and not put any context or nuance around it, one, it clearly shows that they're not paying attention. Two, it also shows they have no clue about the business model. That's why I take my glasses off and rub my eyes about it, because it just constantly cycles. They need to do this, need to do this. There is nothing showing that they need to do it. They're not having problems selling first-party games. They're not having problems making money off their first-party games. The problem that PlayStation has is their first parties are costing them too much to exist. You can see in the technology stack that they've brought through with the PS5 and probably going to be in the PS6 that they're making steps to solve that issue around the cost of developing games, not just for themselves, but for everyone else associated. If you can produce a game for a PlayStation cheaper than it is to produce one for PC, why would you build it for PC to begin with?
So,
That's a great. Yeah,
so
go
I,
ahead.
I agree with all of your things on the PlayStation side, right? For all of the reasons for the business, and this is one, and obviously, Paris is engagement farming, and I haven't seen any responses to any of the responses to his tweets. Maybe there's some in here. I actually, I mean, not to say that it's a counter, but the other perspective though is from a gamer perspective, there is a reason to want it. Right. I mean, the reason to desire it is because, and I wound up just getting out of this game personally myself because I didn't feel there was a need for it anymore. The reason for it is so that I can spend all my money on PC hardware and not buy a PlayStation 5. I mean, which is obviously the business reason why they don't do it, because they know that when they do it, you will not buy a PlayStation 5, right? Which has tons of business reasons. While that's a negative for PlayStation. Absolutely, if PlayStation games came to PC day and date for me, now that I'm a PC gamer only, I would be super happy because then I don't have to wait, a year, 18 months, 2 years, right, for those games to come over, and I can be part of the conversation, right, with people who are playing the game. Now, again, I'm an adult. I make needs-based assessments, right? I don't cry because a business doesn't do what I want. So I've determined at this point that it's not enough value for me personally to own a PlayStation 5. So I'm fine waiting, and I don't cry about those games showing up late on PC.
By the way, Logic, great post here. Can I read your post 5 minutes ago? I'm not.
I was actually hoping you would bring it up on the screen.
Oh, okay. Let me do that then. All right, I'll bring it up on the screen right now. All right.
What's super funny is I actually wrote this way earlier today for Blue Sky, and then I forgot. Oh, there's no thing like a blue check mark on Blue Sky, and so I didn't have time to split it up into multiple, I don't know, blue chirps or whatever you want to call them. And so I saved it to my phone, and I didn't even think about it until you brought up Paris's tweet. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I was talking about when I wrote it. So I just posted it just now, even though I wrote it earlier today.
Yeah. Let me expand
add on, unless Doom wants to chip in on this, I'm just going to add on the Logic. Doom, do you have anything, or?
I just wanted to throw this out there. How true is it that they're not going to be bringing Demon Souls and GT7 to PC now?
Oh,
I mean, is that true? And then two, I could kind of see that. It was like I was saying way earlier in that, if you go and you sell God of War 15 million copies on PlayStation, and then 2 years later you only sell 100,000 copies on PC, it kind of, at least me, I look at it and say, is it really even worth it anymore? And David, I understand what you're saying, that if you have that game, you'll be able to, make, like a little bit, after all the sales and all that on PlayStation 5, you can make that, little extra money on PC in that. But then after a while, some of these games, you just start looking and it's just not selling. That's why I don't agree with the day and date thing. I don't think that's really going to happen maybe for 10 or 15 years, but
so before David jumps in, I'll just speak out as the simulation guy. So the huge difference with the PC market is that while Gran Turismo is obviously the bee's knees on PlayStation, the competition for driving simulations on PC is bonga crazy. I don't believe. I mean, Forza gains traction, right? Because Forza Horizon gains traction because it's arcadey. It does something unique. It's kind of a little bit more of an alternative to Need for Speed and The Crew, right? But look what Forza Motorsport is doing and how the Steam community feels about Forza Motorsport, because Forza Motorsport is being stacked up against the simulations. So I'm sure Gran Turismo would do fine, but it's going to be up against a much more, like, because on PC you don't have people just playing with controllers, right? You have people playing with $1,000 right driving rigs in much higher frequency and density, I think, than they do on PlayStation. I know there are some hardcore simulation people on PlayStation, but I just think on PC it's just bonga and off the charts. And I think you're going to wind up with kind of like exactly what you said, Doom. You're going to wind up with a scenario where the juice isn't worth the squeeze on PC for Gran Turismo.
Right.
Yeah, Gran Turismo would get slaughtered up against iRacing. And you will not get people out of iRacing. iRacing is a big sim racer on PC. You will not get those guys to come out of iRacing to play Gran Turismo on PC. But again, I'm pulling my glasses off and rubbing my eyes and going bald and getting frustrated. How much conversation has been in the last 3 weeks about games that got cancelled? It is absolutely ridiculous, and it drives me up the effing wall that this is the focus point. People are getting in their feelings and getting their undies in a bunch about games that got cancelled, that never made it to see the light of day. That they're not even talking about good games that have been released that should be getting spoken about and played. They're talking about cancellation of things. If something got cancelled, it's because it wasn't going to meet the spec, or it wasn't going to hit the sales targets, or they didn't have faith that it was going to do it. That is quality control in action.
Right.
That is the QA team doing their fucking job. That should have been done for games like Redfall for a start. There's plenty of games that make it onto the market that should have had QA knock it on the head well before the money got spent on it, but they don't. They back them in for their creative and artistic perspective. It hits the market. It's up against competing games that look better, play better, feel better, do better marketing, and they die. And what happens? The studio has to shut down. They have to sack heaps of people, and they sit there scratching their head in their ass at the same time going, geez, I wonder why that happened. It's because no one had the stones to tell them this is not going to sell well. Again, if they're talking about putting stuff on PC, and it's the same argument made for Xbox bringing stuff to PlayStation, think about what it's up against. It's not a matter of competing for dollars in an open pool of plenty of money that's available. Forza Horizon 5 is coming to PlayStation. It's got to compete against at least half a dozen other well-established titles on PlayStation that PlayStation gamers are familiar with that have sold well. Like The Crew 2 is still going. You've got, what's that other one?
Wreckfest and stuff like that.
No, Wreckfest is one that just got, I want to say Solar Eclipse, but that's not it. There's another arcade style game that's either just released or is coming to do with cars. I'm sorry, the name will lose me right now. There's Need for Speed. There's a few others. It's coming over and it has to compete against them. And it has to compete against them, not just in terms of gameplay. It has to compete against other games on PlayStation that are now dropping in this window that people need to make a choice on. It's a saturated market, not just within the genres, but within gaming itself. Now, if PlayStation looking at going the other way, if they have cancelled the PC port for Gran Turismo 7, there will be a reason for that. It'll be because they don't think that they can make the traction it needs for the cost that they're going to put out there. Or the other one, that the Demon Souls one that they've said that they've potentially canned as well. It would be very interesting to note if that is the case, then what is Bluepoint and Nix's working on then? Because if that's the other thing that's been cancelled, Bluepoint's down to one game. A month ago, they were working on 4, potentially 5 games. So they're down to 1. Now, if it's a quality issue because they've seen what happened with Spider-Man, if they can't get Demon Souls to work on PC to the quality level they want, and they're not prepared to invest the money because they don't think it's going to sell, fine. Can it. because it'll be going out up against whatever FromSoft is about to put out that they announced the other week, their online thing. And it's also up against, potentially it'd be up against Phantom Blade Zero and Black Myth Wukong's next update, and all these other ones that are similar. And let's not forget, Souls-like games are not a broad genre that sell millions and millions and millions of copies really quickly. Even as big as Elden Ring was, it's not a broadly accepted, or there's not a huge appetite for that type of tough game to play. And we just saw out of the last set of gaming shows that there's other Souls-like games that are coming. Ninja Gaiden and those ones, they're not Souls-like, like hardcore Souls-like, but they're not exactly easy, particularly when you get into that Neo style of game. Again, think about what is there and what they're looking at doing, and they make these assessments of is it worth the investment? And if the return on investment is not sitting there for them, then you kill them straight away. And Shuhei said this when he was chatting to Greg Miller. The number of games that they cancel at first play test is something like 80% never make it past. At PlayStation, quality control kills more than 80% of their games when they get to the first play test before they spend any money on it. And then it's 3 or 4 out of 5 that make it to final playtest get canned as well for various different reasons. So we're talking about 1 in 12, 1 in 15 games that start off at PlayStation actually make it to market. That's QA working well. So this fascination that these games are getting cancelled and it's a big deal saying Sony's in turmoil. No, it's a good thing that QA is doing its job and killing these things off before they go on and spend time and money and effort on making something that spits out the other end that no one wants.
Yeah, let me read this not super chat, this quote from Logic here. As we see multiverse is ready to sunset its live service component, I will reiterate my pundit pushback. There are no silver bullets to the gaming industry. Every assertion that if you just do this, you'll be successful. I got to pull this up now. Hold on a sec here. Every thumb rule, ROE template, golden rule temple, table stake, maxim, axiom, or doctrine some Yahoo has preached as the one way to rule them all, as well as these rum lines are pointed to as the only acceptable causality for a given risk realization, has proven over and over to have some potential correlation, less than one, but falls far short of being causal. One thing is true: the laws of economics greater than what?
Causal, not casual. Causal.
Casual. Yes, sorry, casual. One thing is true: the laws of economics do exist. By the way, I read in Spanish too, so that's part of my issue. One thing is true: the laws of economics do exist as they were written by Adam Smith in 1776 in The Wealth of Nations. And the market, the tension between suppliers and buyers dictates capitalistic outcomes. And as in war, success in the gaming industry is some parts planning, readiness, reading the tea leaves in the room, and some parts luck and opportunity. So well said there, Logic. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Logic. Like this idea of this silver bullet, if you just do this, you'll be successful. To Falky's point, at least with PlayStation, their business is, we talked about the issues of the rising costs of development, which I think Falky, you allude to, they're looking to, or are addressing. I think that was pretty, Totoki was like, you guys need to figure this shit out. You're not cutting into my profit margins anymore. And best believe when the bean counters are saying that, they are things that are happening behind the scenes to make those things happen. And if they're not, heads will fly. I mean, that's going to happen. But I think that's a great point, Logic. I mean, I think the conversation's always, and Paris is doing this and others do it. This need to assert that Sony needs to do a certain thing that Xbox is doing. And I said this, I think last week, these companies are on different paths now and are approaching their business models a bit different. And that's fine, right? Whatever Microsoft is doing works for Microsoft. Whatever Sony's doing is working for Sony. And clearly it's working for Sony because we see, to your point, Hamp, about the market. the tension between suppliers and buyers, that Sony's not having any issues in that regard on the buyer side of things. And that what they're doing has actually allowed them to have a healthy business, or what they're doing or where they sit in the market is healthy for them from a business perspective.
And lots of people will, hear this segment or see it or whatever, and they'll assert that this is yet another, Xbox versus PlayStation thing. It's not just, for me, what I wrote is not just Xbox versus PlayStation. It's all of, and I'll turn Sauron's eye on the chat a little bit, because sometimes members of you guys are in there too, who come in here and say, well, the only thing you should be doing is live service now, because that's the only thing that makes big numbers. A lot of people will say, oh, well, you got, it's because the game wasn't free to play. And we constantly try and pick like this one thing. And like week after week after week, I try and push, and, lots of us try and push, like, it's not just one thing. Like to me personally, to say that Concord would have been, when you espouse a hypothesis, you need to also acknowledge that by virtue of espousing your hypothesis and asserting that it's the one thing that's right, you need to litmus test it against the antithesis, right? And so tons of people said, well, it's because Concord was paid. It should have been free to play. Okay, now play that back in your head. The antithesis to that is what you're saying is that Concord would have been fine if it had just been free to play. And my point in this post specifically is Multiverses is free to play. Tons of games are free to play, and they still fail. So it's not just one thing.
Sorry to jump in, but just to add to that point, to reinforce your point, Logic, look at the Ubisoft one that they just pulled the plug on recently. An average of 320,000 players a day average for the last 3 months of its existence up to the end of December. 320,000, they said, too expensive to keep going.
Yeah, so it's a complex set of calculus, right, that has to be run, that's determining whether or not these games are free. And largely, a lot of what I wrote about is, it shifts and it changes every year. A lot of times you're chasing a trend, and you're behind the speed leader on it, right? Because the target is already starting to change position on you by the time you think you've latched onto it. And it's not. There's a part of it that is just being smart, just being brilliant, just happening to figure it out. But there's a ton of it that's luck. Right, like I said, I referred to an episode of the Microcast where Rami Ismail was on there, where he said, "Look, nobody would have predicted that Baldur's Gate 3 would have been the thing that it was, and not only did it move huge numbers and sales, critically acclaimed, won awards, right? And no one, literally no one. When I say no one, there's probably one or two people out there, PathX, or whatever. Like, no one was building a thing like Baldur's Gate 3." No one was like rallied around Baldur's Gate 3 going, oh yeah, this is it. This is the sauce. This is going to go big. Right? It started hitting numbers when it shifted its date to what game? I can't remember. What game was it trying to get away from?
Which one?
Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, they shifted their date and shipped early, I want to say.
Oh yeah, it was
they were trying to get away from Starfield, weren't they?
Yeah. It was Starfield. Was it Starfield? That Starfield kind of moved out of the way.
They went early before Starfield. And there was another one floating around at that time. Was it the COD of that year? Was Starfield and COD near each other?
I don't think that's what they were shifting for. But yeah, again, no one would have predicted that, right? So many times the game of the year that we're looking at, sometimes game of the year is kind of sort of predictable. Like you could have placed that bet like 12 months beforehand, right? Knowing the release slate, but lots of times it's not. And so again, this I speak again to the silver bullet. If you just do this one thing, tablets and phones are the way of the future, because that's the only thing kids pay attention to, right? And yet we get market data back that tells us that 80% of developers are developing for PC, because developers don't think that the only thing those kids are going to be interested in is phones and tablets.
And what's interesting, you have surveys too by the ESA that shows that like Gen Alpha and the millennials are actually playing mostly on PC and console.
Yeah, so my feeling is like, look, my personal feeling is like, this is what I'm asking. You don't have to pay attention to me. I'm not anybody to give orders. Like, just stop. Just stop slinging your ding-a-ling out of your pants just for it to be stepped on, because you know you're going to be damn wrong, right? By asserting that, oh, if everybody just does one thing.
Not everybody's got one that they can stand on and trip over, you know.
No, wow, but I think that what gets lost in reading Paris's thing. I think it's not just him. There's other pundits that do this. What gets lost is that it kind of what Seeds is. Detective Seeds is saying in the chat that business at scale is full of nuance, and that gets lost in the conversation. That it really is, and not just business, right? But we talk about on this show. And Hamp, I'll never forget what you said. How market stratification within consumers. I mean, consumers are built differently. We see this with everything. We see this with everything, with shoes, with I'll use trucks. I just got a truck now. With trucks, I mean, there's a reason why there's a half ton, a 3/4 ton. There's a reason why there's a Denali, there's a Tahoe. There's a reason why there's a BMW 5 Series, 3 Series. There's a reason why there's a 5090, 5080, 5070, 5060. I mean, because there's a reason why there's free-to-play games. There's a reason why there's indie games. There's a reason why there's $70 games, because the market is so diverse.
And it's stratified and segmented, right? So it's both vertical and horizontal. So this is one of the things that we've said on this show. Yes, free-to-play games can go big. Battle Royales can go big. But then what do I constantly say on the flip side of that statement? Yes, and that market segment will only support so many. Right. And it's really a little unbelievable sometimes that people go in here and say, oh, well, they just need to do a battle royale. Like, hopefully people are getting it. Like, your challenge when you go battle royale is, yes, there's tons of potential there, but you're up against Fortnite, Apex Legends, and Warzone. And how are you going to get that bone out of the dog's mouth to tell them to come play your game? When, again, one of the critical tipping points, critical metrics on those games going big and being successful is that there are a ton of people over there already. Because what do players want? They want to play lots of people. They don't want to be in matchmaking lobbies seeing the same person all the time. Well, right? They want a lot of variance. They want lots of different skill sets.
Would you guys agree? And I've sat there and I've said this, between people sitting there saying they want SOCOM, they want Resistance, they want Killzone and that, for Sony to bring them back, I just keep sitting there that the market is so saturated with first-person shooters and free-to-play and all this others. That's why Sony doesn't want to bring those back, because they would figure, hey, you know what? There's too much money going into this just to try to, bring this game out. And then are people actually going to lock onto it? Like, it didn't have a huge fan base. Yeah, there was 3 games for each of them, but I mean, you have Call of Duty and Battlefield and, Apex and all this other stuff. I don't know. Sony should stick to doing what they do best. And that is your story-driven games. Sorry, David. I keep cutting you off.
No, I keep jumping in to say something, but it's you're on the mic. You finish your point, please.
No. I'm good. Go ahead.
So there's the 4 of us that are on this panel, this conversation right now. All 4 of us manage people, right? We've managed people. We currently manage people. We're engaged with people. What are the 2 things that people like? The 2 key qualities about individuals. 1, they hate change. 2, they seek comfort.
Yeah, that's me.
If you're going for live service, especially in the shooter zone, you've got those 2 things to climb over before you even get close to pulling them out of what they're comfortable playing. You're not going to get people to abandon their dailies in Fortnite. No chance. You're not going to pull people that play Destiny 2 out of Destiny 2 to come and settle somewhere else. They will do their dailies in Destiny 2, and they have gotten comfortable playing that. It's the same with the Call of Duty players. They are comfortable in that surrounding. You will not get them to change unless their surrounding changes that much that they're ready for change. And even then they'll stick with it because they're hopeful that it'll go back. The online shooter market is absolutely saturated to the gills. And it's the same with the multiverse. The gimmicky fighting games, no one's going to replicate Smash Brothers. Why is Smash Brothers so powerful? Because of the platform it sits on and how much people love that nostalgic hit. You're not going to replicate it anywhere else. That's why Sony never bothered trying again. And in terms of, you're just saying then, Doom, about Sony should try this, should do that. They had to look at live service. They had 4 or 5 different approaches to that, thinking about how they could make it stick. They've canned most of them because they know, one, they're either not going to come up to snuff, or two, that market's oversaturated. They are not going to pull people out of it. We're making too much money off that anyway. We don't want people to abandon that because we're making bank off the microtransactions.
Right.
So why would they shoot themselves in the foot if they're not going to be able to achieve that outcome? Well, it doesn't make business sense to do that. But at least they tried. They had a crack. They looked at it, but they didn't sacrifice. This is the thing that irks me as well. PlayStation didn't sacrifice what was their stable of games coming out. They sacrificed their profit margin to chase that difference. So they've abandoned that. They've given up on that. There's 3 left to come. Of the 10 that they were going to try, I only needed 2 to land. They got the first one to land. They haven't landed one yet. Helldivers 2, you read the sales numbers, Helldivers 2 sold more in the first 6 months than Spider-Man 2 did. That's an interesting metric when you consider the argument for live service games or whatnot, even at a reduced rate. Oh, he's gone, Logic. It's all yours now. At a reduced rate, even $40 instead of $70, but the amount of revenue they got out of it cost a quarter of what it cost Spider-Man 2 to make Helldivers 2 as a second party. There's an argument there to say this is the live service thing is worth chasing, but it's the game itself, not the genre or anything. It's the game itself that clicked with people, and then they had the turmoil of the up and down of not thinking it, did a lot better than they thought it would. And then you've got all the stuff that's flown on from that with the PSN account links and all this other crap. That's a nightmare that they certainly don't want to have to deal with again going forward. They've canned most of the other ones because they either not made the play test or they were going to be too expensive to maintain or various other different reasons. We got Fair Games, Marathon, and one other left. Fair Games is an extraction shooter, isn't it? Fair Games, the extraction shooter. Marathon is, I can't remember what Marathon is now.
It's also an extraction shooter.
Extraction shooters. They got 2 extraction shooters coming out within 12 months of each other. So they'll be day and date PC, PlayStation. Either of those 2 are at risk of not making it because of the cost it is to keep them running. The third one, if it is the one that I think it is their real-time strategy live service game. Now, I don't think that one's going to make it. I really think it's going to get canned and they'll get redeployed to do something else. But if these last 2 come through, then, let's not forget, they started off this whole live service thing. There was a very real risk they were going to lose a lot of these other live service games because of the Activision deal and how the consolidation thing was panning out at that point. So, they had to react at that time, various different business reasons. But, the chasing of it in a saturated market, if the third party still there supporting it, it is no sense in PlayStation investing in that if they can just collect the bank out the back end of these super high performing games for actually doing nothing other than having a storefront and a console there for them to play it on. But again, they were up against the behaviors of consumers. And a 1,000,000% agree with everything Logic has ever said about this game industry and this market from the consumer perspective. They are broad, they are finicky, they are specific in what they like. You will not get one game that satisfies everyone. You might get a game that attracts a lot of different players, but you will not get one that satisfies everyone. And that's just the fact of it. That's why we have so many different genres. And we've got so many different players in that market space. But the pie is big enough for things to be successful that they don't have to sell 100 million copies of. But if you're going to go and play in a particular space, such as live service shooter games, you've got to have a very unique formula and you need to make it must play. I don't know why Marvel's Rivals is as big as it is. And I bet that no one else thought it was going to be the hit that it has been. But can it sustain longevity like Fortnite and COD and the rest of them do? Think about how much it costs to keep people engaged with COD and how much it costs to keep people engaged with Fortnite. They're talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year in investment to keep these things rolling. Some studios just can't do that. They just can't. They don't want to. It's not sustainable. So the bigger the revenue, the bigger the risk it is of generating it in these instances. But it just relies on people getting in and keeping them in there long enough for them to get comfortable and resisting to change. And that's why you'll see some of these people, they will bitch and moan and complain about, Valorant's done this, or Titan's done that, or, COD, we don't like this, or Warzone's done. They will complain like that someone's stolen the jam out of their donut and then pissed all over it. But they will stay there because they're comfortable and familiar in their surroundings and they know what to expect. And if you can't pry them out of that, there is absolutely no point in continuing. And if that was the first play test at PlayStation with a lot of these live service games where, Scott Rode and Shuhei and a heap of others sat down and played these things and went, this is good, but is it good enough to pull someone off the competing game that's out in the marketplace? If the answer is, it isn't a direct yes, can the game and start something else. And that's again circling back to QA in good effect, because you will not climb over people who are comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who has spent any time deep in the Destiny 2 community knows that no one complains about Destiny 2 and how bad a game it is more than the people who have spent thousands and thousands of hours in Destiny 2. So,
Right.
And so, Falky talked about another thing that's very common that I, wrote this post about pushing back against the pundits, which is that, many people have said that, now I'm forgetting what I was about to say. There's something about Concord in live service games, but I'll skip on. I think because I was also trying to think about this other thing. So Wara and a few of the other people in the chat, just to kind of expound on what I think Falky and I have been trying to say about the potential for Gran Turismo, right, when it hits PC. It's not simply a one-on-one about Gran Turismo versus iRacing. What I was really opening with is that it's not just iRacing, but it's going to be Formula One, Assetto Corsa, Automobilista, Project Cars, R Factor, Le Mans, WRC. Right, and the point is that, from my perspective, it's that the competition on PC for hardcore simulation racing people, right, is that the competition is more in number. Those players are more entrenched, right? Because remember, like, not every wheel and pedal set plays well with every single racing game. Lots of these guys have hyper specialized tunings and setups. And so when Gran Turismo 7 comes along, the question is, is there going to be enough interest there to pry one of those people out of their seat, right, to go try something else that, as you said, right, for a person who's a hardcore simulation racing fan, has this air around it and is going to be able to tell the smell that it is marketed, wrapped, and badged as a simulation. But when it compares to a PC simulation, it's going to wind up falling short, which is kind of the same bathtub and crevice in that Forza Motorsport is in right now, right? Where the sim light that it has been in the past was something that played out okay, but just because of like the slight fall off in fidelity that the current Forza Motorsport has, and several other issues like stability and performance and things like that as they shifted engine. In my opinion, it just makes it a more competitive landscape than what it is when they're at home on PlayStation, in a way that doesn't allow them to break out with critical acclaim like you do when you move something like a God of War or a Spider-Man over to PC, is all I'm saying. And I recognize that there are people who won't agree with me, and that's fine. I just wanted to kind of explain myself.
Okay. So, Lodge, let me ask you. Go ahead, Doomsayer.
Brap, I just wanted to cut in real quick here. I actually got to go. But I just wanted to say appreciate you inviting me on here and that, and give me a little bit of time and that kind of thing. If you want to, we're having a show tomorrow at 3:00. I'll give you a key. You can just walk right in whenever you want and that. So, but I appreciate you doing this for me tonight.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Doomsayer. It's a pleasure having you on. Thanks for coming on, man. And definitely have to get you back on again when you have some more time to, hang out and talk video games with us.
Yeah, just hit me up and that. Just let me know, and I'll move time around to make room for you.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one tonight.
See you, dude.
All right, you too, man. Yep, see you, Doomsayer.
So, Brett, before you go, I remembered the thing that I was trying to remember before. The part of that Falky mentioned that has also been part of my pundit pushback has been the people who have said, see, PlayStation, you put Helldivers 2 day and date on PC and see it worked out well. So therefore you should do things like put obviously skating by the fact that the, entirely different games playing to entirely different audiences that accentuate their strategy that they've chosen in entirely different ways. So it doesn't really make sense, right? When you peel back the onion and really, again, litmus test the hypothesis against the antithesis. Yep. Sorry, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I just gonna say I want to grab these super chats, but let me ask you, like, you talk about like the noise, right? The noise that's on PC as it relates to racers. Like you said, it's not a one-to-one comparison per se of Forza, not Forza, I'm sorry, GT7. I forget the other game you mentioned. It's that there's these other games that are on the PC space that not Forza. I keep saying Forza, that GT7 has to compete with. We're on the PlayStation, it's GT7, and all eyes are on GT7, right? I mean, there's other racers, but you seem to like it almost seems like there's value in having more value than having GT7 on your platform as exclusive, because it's not necessarily competing in a crowded space.
Yeah, in some ways, to me, in my head, it's analogous to look. And I would strongly recommend. I've strongly recommended several books while we've been on here, but I also have fear in what I see going on in school systems and things that people read now in their educational tracks versus things they don't read anymore. So I would strongly suggest, if you haven't read Sun Tzu's Art of War, that you read Sun Tzu's Art of War, because the practical application of a lot of the rules that he teaches, which are basic core tenets of warfighting today at the operational theater level, and they also apply to business. And so one of the things of those is the centricity of mass of a force, or just simply the aggregate mass of a force, right? Which my point is, my analogy is that for Gran Turismo 7 is much greater on PlayStation than it is on PC. A lot of the racers that I mentioned are also present on PlayStation. Assetto Corsa is on PlayStation. The Formula One series is present on PlayStation. There's probably one other one that I mentioned that's also like they're over there, but they don't have nearly the center of mass behind them, the push, the gravitas, the mind share. Whereas Gran Turismo 7 is a large orbital mass, right? On PlayStation, it sucks up a lot of air out of the room. It takes up a lot of space. It is very much in gamers' windshields. If you are a racing fan on PlayStation, you play Gran Turismo 7, right? Most likely in preponderance. If you're a racing fan on PC, Gran Turismo 7 comes along, it is just a drop in the bucket in comparison to all the other choices that you have. And in many cases, in a lot of those choices, those people are going to be very entrenched on those. Again, it's not an argument that PlayStation has zero reason to consider putting Gran Turismo 7 on PC. It's just my feeling that the value proposition, the ROI potential for putting Gran Turismo 7 on PC may not play as greatly as the thoughts of behind, putting Spider-Man or God of War, or even Ratchet and Clank, right, on PC. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. But I think it's a lot closer to being a coin flip, right, and being a 49% versus 51% chance versus, what the calculus might be on some of those other titles.
Yeah, let me grab some of these super chats here real quick. Warwana with a $2 super chat says, I just want to know when is Bug Snacks 2? Seriously. That is Slummo's favorite game. And then Stanley Buffington with the $5 super chat says, Paris also said Sony should put their games on PlayStation Plus. Basically, what he means is what Microsoft does. Basically, what he means is that what Microsoft does, Sony should do. He doesn't have an opinion of his own. I think that was all the super chats.
That's familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to go to you here, Falky, because a little bit of a leadership shakeup here. PlayStation, Herman Hulse and Hideki Nishino previously shared top roles since there was a co-CEO thing that they had going on post Jim Ryan. But now Hideki Nishino has become Sony Interactive Entertainment's sole chief executive officer after a period of joint rule with PlayStation Studios boss Herman Hulst. This is an article by Tom Phillips over at.
They do a great job of misrepresenting this.
Yeah,
they
so
really
So Sony's reshuffle also comes with a new boss for the overall company, with veteran exec and former CFO Hiroki Tsutoki now the company's overall CEO and president. Halsby will remain boss of PlayStation Studios, now reporting to Yoshino rather than running Sony's gaming arm alongside him. Both men have shared leadership for PlayStation since last year's departure of former boss Jim Ryan, with Yoshino focused on the company's business side, while Halst focused on overseeing its game development studios. Halst will continue to look after the development, publishing, and business operations of SIE's first-party content, and further work with Sony Pictures to adapt key PlayStation franchises into films and TV series. I'm truly honored to take the helm at Sony Interactive Entertainment. Nishino said in a statement, technology and creativity are two of our biggest strengths as we continue to focus on developing experiences to deliver entertainment for everyone. We'll continue to grow PlayStation community in new ways, such as IP expansion, while also delivering the best in technology innovation. I want to thank Herman for his expertise and leadership as he continues his role as CEO, Studio Business Group. Nishino concluded, I am deeply grateful for the PlayStation community and their continued support. I'm very excited for what the future holds. Go ahead, Falky.
So I would encourage you to find the Gematsu article announcement of this, because this thing is not even close. This is frustrating. Jim Ryan left, and he was covering way too much, and they needed to sort out the issue with the software, right? With the software studios. You can't do that and focus on hardware at the same time when you're about to launch the Pro, and you've got all this other stuff that needs to happen with getting the next, the PS6 and all that sort of stuff kicked off. So the sensible thing was, we bring in someone who's good at software and we make them charge of software, and bring someone in hardware who's good in charge with hardware. The person doing software needs to travel a lot. The person doing hardware can sit in the office here in Japan. So they've put the two of them in charge at different points. Both of them are reporting to Hiroki Tsutoki, right? So Hiroki Tsutoki is reporting up the chain to, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Who was the guy in charge of Sony at that time?
It's the guy's name is Yoshida, isn't it?
No,
The guy who was
so.
the guy
Kaz.
who was
Wasn't it Kaz?
Kaz was CEO at one point, but then
Yeah.
he retired. So I think the guy who's I'll look it up.
Yeah, sorry, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. So the guy right at the top has vacated as CEO, top boss of Sony whole, and gone up into the board, and he's just president and chairman there. Hiroki Tsutoki has taken a promotion to take over that spot. Instead of being just the COO and CFO of Sony, he's now top dog of Sony. That leaves a vacant position where Hiroki Tsutoki was sitting. So what they've done is they've looked at it and gone, which one of these two is in a better position and better placed to be promoted up into that role? And they've picked the guy in charge of platform because it's A, domestic, and B, it's the platform. That's where they need critical focus at the moment because they're going in the next phase. So Herman's basically been said, well, instead of reporting directly to Hiroki Tsutoki, you've now got a direct report to a vacant position. Well, we'll just promote this guy. And he continues to look after the platform, but he's now top dog here. You're looking after all the software stuff. Keep doing what you're doing. So the idea that he's been demoted or been, put in a lesser position is not right. It's nonsensical and it's disingenuous to say so. He's still doing the same job he was before they did this shift. All they've done is they've said, well, we need to have a person in charge to fill in this role that's been vacated by Hiroki Tsutoki. We'll promote this guy. So now they've got boss of Sony, chairman of Sony, boss of Sony, boss of gaming and network services, all in the same building in Japan, which is what they should have had from the start when they did the consolidation in 2017. They're shifting Lin Tao out of her lower position up into a more senior position within Sony, and they've shifted a couple of other people around. And if you look through at the bottom of the Gematsu article, they list out who the new people are and what their roles are. And they've sort of done can't think of the right words to use here, but they've said you've got CEOs in charge of the key business units, but then you've got the next level up, which are the VPs or the CEOs in charge of the broader business groups. So you might have 2 or 3 CEOs of units reporting into one in the group. And that's all it is. It's a corporate restructuring effect at the top. to try and get all the key decision makers across the key business divisions, groups within their splits. So gaming and network services, music, movies and TV, image censoring, TVs and whatever the rest of it is, all sitting in one building where they can get together and make the decisions faster than the snail's pace that they've been doing it in the last 3 or 4 years. It's not necessarily a detrimental thing to have a better corporate structure which allows you to make faster decisions in a market that is rapidly changing.
Yeah, just to fill in some of the additional information. So, in another thing to kind of ratchet this thing in as to why some of, again, the punditry is kind of ridiculous. This is actually an arrangement that was being put in place, if I'm not mistaken, early 2024. So this was actually supposed to go down before Jim Ryan exited the company. There was already a plan of, first of all, as we've explained on the show multiple times, at this level, there is a succession plan. These things are not unplanned. Successors are determined. They are tagged. There's a reason why people are groomed and put into positions so that they can train, so that when you put a person in the CEO seat, it's not like he or she hasn't been close to that decision making, right? And so the plan had been for Totoki to take the reins from Yoshida before Jim Ryan left. When Jim Ryan left, there was a pause put on that plan. So Yoshida was the CEO of Sony Corporation. I believe he took over from Kaz. This plan, like I said, to move Totoki up has been in place for a while. When Ryan left, he put Totoki in to continue to look over PlayStation. Totoki was the COO. Then they came up with the co-CEO of the PlayStation business, or co-president of the PlayStation business unit, and that's what has shifted, because Yoshida, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Yoshida has moved up to just be the chairman now. I don't think he hasn't exited the company, right?
No, so he's just the chairman.
Yep. So Yoshida decided, hey, let's go ahead and affect the plan that we've been talking about for a while now. I'm getting old. I'm getting tired. I just want to go be chairman. I don't want to be chairman and CEO. Totoki fleets up. Nishino fleets up, leaving Herman Hulst back in charge of the studios like he had been before.
Yep. So I think BRAP's got it up on the screen now. I shout out Gamatsu a lot. And from my knowledge, it's one main person with a couple of supports occasionally. And the amount of content that is produced out of that place that is to the point, factual, and the volume that comes out is insane. However, they do a really good job of, in the right way, and crediting the right people, of lifting things out of the articles and the press releases and all that, and putting them in here and saying, this is actually what happened. They're one of the very few gaming media places that I actually follow, and they do an exceptionally good job of explaining stuff. What you've got on the screen there, I'm taking is from that article. It points out who's in what position and how it's working. And you'll notice in that list, there's an awful lack of US-based people now, and a very big lack of non-Japanese-based people. Shifting markets? Who knows? What I can say for certain is that the US-based divisions of Sony overall, not just gaming, but Sony overall, is costing them a fortune at the moment. It's killing them financially.
Yeah, and so my only, it's not pushback. I think I'd pitch it as refinement or difference of perspective. Seeds has said the same thing too. Seeds has said in the chat they went for a more agile structure for quicker results. My contention is that they haven't gone to a new structure. They went back to the same old structure that they had before, where there was a dedicated PlayStation CEO, a dedicated PlayStation executive in charge of creative and studios, a CEO of Sony Corporation, right, and a chairman. So they've just gone back to the same organizational structure they always had. Again, Jim Ryan leaves. Totoki comes down out of the COO position to take Jim Ryan's old position, right, for a while. Then brings in Nishido and Hulst to co-join as kind of some split personality of Ryan's position. Totoki goes back up to COO. Now Yoshida fleets up from CEO to just chairman. Totoki moves up. Nishino is the one guy of the pick of the two co-CEOs, because every time look, no offense to PlayStation, plenty of companies do this. They do this goofy co-CEO thing. It would be, I would flip out if somebody put me in that position. I've been in that position at work. I hate and despise it because people are unclear of who's actually in charge. Your like there's no necessarily tiebreaker between you two. It forces the both of you to go to your boss when you do your blah blah. At any rate, Nishino is the one guy I pick. Anytime co-CEOs are put in place, it's always temporary, and somebody fleets up to the actual job. So Nishino moves up, and Holst is left to do what he's always been doing. So that's how, I mean, in my mind, it's just they've just gone back to the way things were before. I think what they wanted to do, to a certain extent, is which makes sense. They wanted some time to flight test these guys in this position before they made a final decision on which way they wanted to go.
And it shouldn't be understated. And not that I disagree with any. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. It should not be understated or underappreciated how important or how effective it is to have key decision makers all in the same building at the same time. It is phenomenally powerful for that collaboration point to exist. And it, at times over the last 5 years, having Jim Ryan flying around the world and away from the others, and in different time zones, you can almost tell exactly when a decision should have been made and it wasn't. It was delayed, and then there's all hell breaks loose because of it. It should not be understated having that capability for them to, like you said, go back to a structure that was working, but is the bottom end of that is done the consolidation that should have happened 5 years ago.
Well, maybe even, I think it's been a pain point for an even maybe longer period of time, right? Because Kaz was CEO of the PlayStation business unit. He was the first one who really consolidated it more so into its structure because he took it over in the wake of the PlayStation Network breach of 2011. That's when network services were actually off in their own, in a separate division, because the EverQuest guys and all the PC infrastructure was over there. They brought that in under the PlayStation umbrella. Kaz took that over, but Kaz fleets up to CEO. I'm not sure who he turned it over to at that moment in time, but eventually that tenure up until now has been Sean Layden's tenure and then Jim Ryan's tenure. So it's been a pain point for a while. And it's interesting that now they're getting it back to having the PlayStation guy in the building, right?
Yeah, it's a segregation. It also brings through that segregation of the person who's in charge of all the regulatory and corp governance and all the rest of that top end crap that most people don't seem to think exists, but it does, and it is all consuming bullshit. And someone just focused on making the decisions to get stuff to consumers. And Sean probably had, say Andrew House might have had it as well, but Sean Layden had the best, not freedom, what's the word I'm looking for here? The best boundaries is probably another way of putting it, to actually do that, to be the head, the focal point, the person out in front. Like Jim Ryan in front of a camera, oh God, it'd make you cringe every time. That's not to say that Jim was bad at what he did. Jim was really good at what he did as a boss, but he just, camera presence, touchy and difficult. Sean Layden had that presence, had the ability. Andrew House was very similar. But they could show up and they could do the operations work and do the decision making. They weren't burdened by the governance and the legal stuff and the back of house BS and dealing with the board and all this other stuff. So going back to a structure like that should, and I say should, I'm not saying it will, but it should allow Herman to focus on what he does well, which is games, because he's not had bad games. Like, Herman's overseen some really good games. He's just had bad luck with the Horizon stuff. It'll allow him to focus on the stuff they need to get to market to the consumers and focus on the consumer side stuff. And it will allow Ishido to look at the focus on the platform, the back of house stuff, and look after all the governance and corporate bits and pieces. And in that structure, you need those clear delineations of who's responsible for what and who's reporting to what. And I think it's a really, really well set. Is it going to help with their cost problem? We will find out, but it's certainly, I think, a step in the right direction. And sorry, just to address the question in the chat about PlayStation headquarters. PlayStation Global headquarters has always been in the Sony building in Japan. They have a US headquarters because local regulations require them to have a US headquarters. But overall, top decision making has always happened in Japan and has since they were incepted.
All right, thank you, Falky. All right, I do want to move on, gentlemen, to article here from GameIndustry.biz. Xbox Q2 hardware sales down 29% as Game Pass experiences record growth. Overall gaming revenue decreased 7%. Xbox content and services saw a 2% rise. This is by Sophie. What's
it's
that?
Bad. It's bad.
We'll get.
If you look at the transcripts from the earnings call, it gets worse.
Well, we'll get to that here in just a sec. So Microsoft has released its financial results for the second quarter of its fiscal year, which saw its overall gaming revenue decrease by 7%, while hardware sales were down 29%. The numbers for 3 months ending December 31st, 2024, revenue $69.6 billion, up 12% year on year. More personal computing, including Xbox revenue, $14.7 billion. Operating income, $31.7 billion, up 10% year over year. Net income, $24.1 billion, up 10% year over year. Highlights: Microsoft experienced a positive quarter overall, driven by its cloud services, no surprise, which generated $40.9 billion, up 21% year on year. Its AI business also saw a major increase, no surprise there, of 170%, yes, 175% year on year, having surpassed an annual revenue rate of $13 billion. While its gaming segment saw a decline in revenue, Xbox content and services rose 2% due to stronger than expected performance in Activision Blizzard content, including the launch of Call of Duty Black Ops 6. In the earnings call, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella shared that Xbox Game Pass set a new quarterly record for revenue, with its PC subscriber base growing by over 30%. I'd like to know, Satya, what that means. Like, set a new quarterly record for revenue. Like, what's that revenue number from what? Nadella also revealed that 140 million hours were streamed on Xbox cloud gaming during the quarter. He also knew that Indiana Jones: The Great Circle had been played by more than 4 million people since its launch on December 9, 2024. Reflecting on the gaming setting, Nadella said Microsoft is delivering its plan of improving the profitability of the business by providing higher margin content and platform services. Looking ahead, Microsoft expects Xbox content and services revenue to increase in the low to mid single digits for Q3, driven by first-party content. Xbox Game Pass. It expects hardware revenue to decline year on year. Go ahead, Falky. You were saying something about the transcripts.
So, in the transcripts, the call transcripts, Satya has most comments, and then Amy Hood has a couple of comments in there to make as well. I will draw attention specifically to things that are not gaming related, and we have spoken about this at length. Microsoft's biggest challenge at the moment is not in getting Xbox to perform, it's in where they're losing ground in AI and cloud, intelligent cloud, and all the rest of it, right? And in the earnings call, Amy Hood makes it crystal clear, like you can't make it any clearer than belting someone up the side of the face with a baseball bat and saying, "Listen here, you." Made it crystal clear their investment going forward is going to be in AI, intelligent cloud, and Azure. That's their battleground, and that's their short and medium term focus of their capital investment. That's where they're spending their money. Satya has, all in his comments you just pointed out there, we are focused on improving the profitability of gaming. That means, for lack of a better term, that daddy's wallet is closed to Xbox. They're not getting the free pass and the subsidies that they had in the past. Their gaming revenue for the first quarter, where they've had Activision for a year-to-year comparative, so this is the fifth quarter, they didn't put how much the Activision impact was in their stack, in their slide deck. But if they had a 7% decrease or 8% constant currency decrease in gaming revenue, that
Falky out. Don't mean to interrupt you, Falky. Got to give a shout out to Lotus Esprit for gifting 10 BRAP VIP memberships. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry, Falky. Go ahead, man.
That's all right. I'm glad to see someone spending some cash on us. Thank you very much. I'm sure there's a few people in that list that's popped up that are really going to appreciate that. Yeah, that's very generous. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was on a rant.
It actually helps us to pay Falky for his appearances here. Falky charges by the hour, so
Oh yeah,
like
yeah,
an attorney, yeah.
by the hour plus outgoings. The crap. I lost where I was at.
Your daddy's
Sorry.
wallet's no longer
Yeah, Daddy's
open or
wallet's
something.
closed. Subsidies
Yeah.
are done. So if it needs to be profitable. They did the up. This is those comments is what. And the other parts that are in there saying, 140 million hours on xCloud streaming, 4 million players for the Indiana Jones game, and we launched Call of Duty, was in Game Pass, and Game Pass had its pricing lifted by 12, 16, 18%, whatever it was, a couple of months prior. And all of these things happened, and they got a 2% increase of gaming and network of their Xbox subscription and services revenue compared to last year, which was abysmal last year anyway. They got a 2% increase, having put all that Activision games in it all of a sudden. They said they had a record number of subscriptions on a day one release for Call of Duty, but they only got a 2% increase, and their gaming revenue went backwards 7% in a quarter where Call of Duty had one of its biggest launches in recent history, in recent years. And they had the Indiana Jones game in. They did 4 million players, but their gaming revenue went backwards and their services revenue hardly shifted. And their hardware revenue is tanking like you wouldn't believe. It's tanking from a low number. And then Thatcher says, we're focused, changing our shift from growth to profitability. The shift from growth to profitability. Daddy's wallet is closed. They're going to have to bleed this thing for all they can. And hence why you see pretty much the hours after this has happened, Forza Horizon 5, one of their leading games in that area, is coming to PlayStation. There's 2, possibly 4 more that others have said are coming. Gears, Halo, whatever else is coming. They're going to have a hard time catching up from this performance. But I tell you, the Indiana Jones game is going to have to land well on PlayStation for them to have an impact there. Because, my Lord, they are not making this thing work at all. And the way that the revenue is allocated, I'm not going to get into a TED talk about it. If you want to know how it works, go and read their annual statements. It tells you how they allocate their revenue and their expenditure in their accounting notes. It would take me forever to explain it to people because they just won't listen. Anything that's directly attributed, that comes directly from an Xbox product, Xbox keeps the revenue and Xbox cops the expense. Anything that is sort of potentially shared within that area of personal computing, gets allocated either based on a head count, revenue generation points, or something like that, right? Before we add it all up. So things like search advertisements and all that sort of stuff, if they're on their PC and they're in Xbox and they're searching for stuff and ads start popping up, some of that revenue will land in Xbox, but most of it will land in ads. Or you've got other things from the home pages that are happening, or in the synergy stuff that goes on. It could actually be worse than what they're stating here if you only looked at directly attributed expenditure and revenue. They could be even further upside down than what they are, because let's not forget, they're not paying for a lot of the back-end cloud stuff. They're not paying for these Azure servers. They're not paying for a lot of their technology stuff. That all gets written out when they do the consolidation. That all gets put back to the big Azure end and intelligent cloud end. They're copying all those expenses and they're running at massive gross margins. Xbox is running at loss margins, and it's at the gross margin level, it's running at losses. And when you get down to net, it's net losses, big time net losses. It's not sustainable. To make this thing profitable, they are really going to have to leverage on selling stuff on Steam and selling stuff on Epic and selling stuff on PlayStation. They're going to have to hope to Christ that PlayStation people show up with their wallets open to do it. I don't know how many more bad quarters they can take if this trend keeps going, because the forecast is saying low single-digit growth. Low single-digit growth in our revenue. well, if they can't get their revenue growing, and the low single-digit growth in revenue, and they've got games coming to PlayStation, they're lining up to put their tentpole games on PlayStation, and their forecast is saying this thing's not going to shift. Year on year is going to be horrendous, and they're going to be even further in the hole. I honestly really can't see a way out of this for them if they keep going down this pathway. They're going to have to dump something, cut bait and run, or they're going to have to lay off a heap of people, because having that many studios to try and support content going into that subscription service, and people are just not paying the cash for it, it's unsustainable. And if that just turn the corner and turn the wallet off because they've got to chase improvements in the areas which make Microsoft the big dollars, I read between the lines on this thing is not painting a very nice picture at all. And people can argue with me all they like. I'm more than happy for it to be stress tested by like-minded individuals that have got level of knowledge around reading financial reports and reading between the lines, and even happy to be corrected here by logic if he's got a different opinion. But man, what Amy and Satya said in those few sentences, and the Q&A had no questions about games. It was all focused on AI, Azure, and intelligent cloud. Look, it's not good. It's not good at all. And we told them, there are many people, not just myself, Logic, and yourself. There are many people that said this is not going to go well. You can't make everything exclusive in the Game Pass because people aren't paying for it. You can't spend $80 billion on a consolidation, wipe out that much revenue, and then not release games and expect to be in a good position. It's just not sustainable. And based on what these numbers are saying, it's not. It's they say, 2% growth in subscription services, blah, blah, blah. Glaze over it. Yeah, we're really excited about the future. There's no money left to invest in this thing. It's got to become profitable. That means they're hacking out expenditure because their revenue forecast is saying it's still going to be bleak. So I don't know how many of the current studios are going to survive the onslaught that's coming, because I keep forgetting her name, Logic, and it always happens when I'm on this call. The new COO of Microsoft is not going to tolerate this kind of bullshit.
So real quick, Falky, it's all what Detective C said about layoffs Q3. When I see those numbers, and then I hear a focus on profitability, which, I mean, at this point doesn't really surprise me given the investments that have been made, right? It's like, okay, now we've made these massive investments. Now it's time to, see some profitability from that. But the quickest way to kind of get some to kind of jumpstart profitability is, and I hate saying this, is to lay people off. I lived this a year ago, or the last 2 years, I feel like, and I've seen this with other companies. But before I get to Logic, though, I want to get to some super chat, and I hope the layoffs don't happen, by the way. But when I hear that and I see those numbers, and I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me. I hope it doesn't happen. I'm not rooting for layoffs. I'm just saying the way companies tend to operate, reduction of human capital is a quick way to boost numbers. Yep. Let me get super chats here real quick before I go to Logic.
I've got a response to that super chat too. Sorry.
All right, Street Shadow, the $5 super chat says Sony probably had a handheld in R&D well before the Portal. Portal was an extension of the R&D to see what the market was like for PlayStation handheld. Thank you for that super chat, Street Shadow. Then we have Everboard Saga with the $5 super chat. Thank you for that super chat. Everboard says, to be fair, Amy the Hood did give guidance that because this is the first release of COD being released in Game Pass, so the revenue will be realized over time.
Yeah. May I quickly respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me this. I don't disagree with that guidance, but it's the volume or the value that's going to be spread over time that's the concern. It's only the revenue that was generated by COD in GP that is going to get spread over time, and that revenue stream is basically that 2% uplift year on year. How much COD is attributed to that. Now, if they're going to give most of it to COD, that means that the Indiana Jones game is going to get 4/5 of nothing, which means that studio is going to be on the block. They've got licensing and additional stuff they need to pay for that Indiana Jones game. So I don't disagree with what Everborn's saying, but it doesn't make it better. It actually makes it just as bleak for one way or the other.
or
They
just
can't.
go ahead,
They
Falcon.
can't take the revenue. They can't take the revenue from the sales on other platforms and then backfill that into realizing it over time for COD and Game Pass. The stuff that's off the other platforms has had to be realized as revenue in that period, which is why the sales down 7% is just an absolute head scratcher. That is a horrendous performance when you've got COD selling big numbers in other platforms.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you, Falky. The 7% to your point, when I saw revenue decrease 7%, I wasn't expecting that on the heels of Call of Duty. And not just it's not exclusive. It's Call of Duty's multi-plat game. It's arguably one of the biggest releases, revenue
What are they
drivers in the
selling else?
industry.
But what else?
And,
What else were they selling? They had two games
and
in
I'm
the whole
just
quarter. What
and
else did
I'm
they have?
and I'm kind of surprised. And I guess the other question I pose to you in Logic, and you don't have to answer this because I do want to get to your point to your point here, Logic, because I know you're getting ready to chime in. But this kind of reminds me of, you talk about that 2% rise, and that money needs to be. This kind of reminds me of what Sean Layden said about how AAA game releases in a subservice, the math just doesn't work because you only have so many pennies you can spread across, right? That
Exactly.
studios have to make money. There's only so many pennies you could spread. And there just aren't, maybe you say, I think you said quarters, but there's just not enough quarters to spread around when you start including these games with these big production values in a day-and-date service.
That's the bottom end of the indies, so that the top 20 games get to spread and everyone else gets nothing, basically. Logic, are you going to touch on the disparity between a 2% growth, the highest day one subscriptions in the Game Pass for day one release, and the fact that those subscriptions would have been at the 18 or 12 or 16% increased price rate and not offered at free or day $1?
I wasn't going to get into that, but the thing I was going to mention was, I mean, so to me, maybe an oversimplification, but what the 7% loss of revenue says, in comparison to the 2% uplift in Game Pass subscribers, when you note that you're looking at the quarter of the release of Call of Duty into Game Pass versus the year-on-year quarter from the previous year when Call of Duty wasn't on Game Pass, to me speaks of cannibalization, which, you know, we have this ongoing back and forth and push and pull about people who deny that it happens. I mean, to me, what it says is that the year before you had more people buying Call of Duty, and now it's in Game Pass, so you have a lot of people taking advantage of that. Will you make that up over time? Sure, maybe, but the things that you have that make that just a daunting challenge, you may make that up linearly, right? Dollar to dollar. But then when you throw in adjustments, right, you're working against the constantly dwindling value of the dollar. You have the fact that the expenses that you put on the books and capital expenses for the development of Call of Duty were utilizing dollars that were greater in value. So everything that's coming out after that is constantly dwindling in value. But more importantly, you have those charges on your books. And the whole point of this whole capital investment to fund a game, put the game on sale, now you start depreciating, right? Is that you're trying to accelerate this tail chase of, you've got costs on your books, which are at the lowest common denominator, a negative, right, in terms of your financial health and how you appear on Wall Street, versus accruing revenue and charging off depreciation and getting those costs back down, right? So that your final financial health outlook improves. Now you're saying, I'm not making that money up as quickly because I'm cannibalizing sales of the game, but I'm going to make it up over time. Making it up over time is not a good look. Right? What people are looking for is for you to burn those expenses off as quickly as possible, particularly once the game goes on sale.
Yeah. Imagine, adding to what you're saying, imagine if they have to put in a goodwill write-down for the Activision purchase. Could you imagine? Like, that would be heads rolling if they had to take a 10% write-down on the goodwill. That's $8 billion write-down expenditure that would hit the bottom line. That has a sizable impact. Not and the goodwill write down or an impairment for it, in layman's terms, this is the 5-year-old version. I'm going to explain it at that level. You bought something for $80 billion. You can't generate the cash that you thought you were going to generate with it. And you have to say, well, my $80 billion investment is not going to get that return level. It's now going to get the return level of the $60 billion investment. I need to write off $20 billion of goodwill. And it has to happen in one hit in this year. And that's what burnt the shit out of Take-Two last year, was they took that massive write down on Zynga and it turned it from a barely like a sizable loss into a big loss. And they're still carrying the impact of that. Microsoft, if Microsoft have to take even a 10% impact of goodwill on this on Activision alone, so $7 or $8 billion, that's going to have a sizable impact to the earnings per share. That is not going to go down well, and that's the sort of thing that would not only get Phil sacked, that could get Satcher sacked. That's the level of impact of risk we're talking about that they've taken here. I still can't figure out, and only reason must be because he's got so many bloody shares, is how Phil has still got a job there with this level of incompetence around investment. He promised. Amy Hood stood in front of a committee and said, we expect this deal to be earnings per share positive for the shareholder from day one. And from day one, they have not made any money out of this deal. They have made loss after loss after loss. The 4 quarters before this, it was like $2 or $3 billion in net losses. And now they've stopped showing it to us. Again, they've stopped showing us information they were with no explanation. That can only mean it's going badly. And then you look at these results. It is pathetic that this is where they've landed.
Falky, you should be on that.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Logic.
So I think, I mean, my feeling about the hardware is that what's going on in conjunction with like where the earnings are, in conjunction with Satya's statements, is they're trying to flatten out, right? And they're trying to put a voice track behind that while that glide slope is happening. You look at the 29% backslide, right, in hardware revenue, and Satya's explanation, which by the way was the main contributing factor to the 7% backslide in revenue. Satya's explanation is that, you know, we are focused on like the long-term profitability of this business, which will become one that is heavily realized around fully paid subscribers, right? Not people buying hardware. What I think is that, you know, the air is going to continue to go out of the balloon of the hardware, and it's going to continue evolving towards, like I've been saying for a very long time, I would even say Paris Lilly's recent comments agree with me, right? That because he said, like, they're talking about building the box, they're talking about building a hybrid box that that has access to multiple storefronts, and that box will be more expensive than your $500 console, but it's not meant for your mainstream console buyer as they have historically existed. It is for the 30 million hardcore fans. And my only pushback to that is it'll be less than the 30 million, right? Because the 30, 35 million people who are on Xbox, who are on new Xboxes now, some of them are on Xboxes because of low cost of access, because they got Xbox Series S's, and they combine that with Game Pass, and that's their only participation in the system. They're not buying a $700, $800 like mini PC box. You have a lot of people who have Xboxes who could afford to buy a higher box, but will make the same assessment that I've been making, which is, but why would I? I already have a gaming PC that has access to Steam and has access to the Epic Store. I have a Steam Deck that also has access to Steam. I don't need something that is less than either one of those current formulas. I don't need something less powerful than my gaming PC. I don't need something less mobile than my Steam Deck to give me access to stores that I already have access to. So what is the value prop? So I mean, I agree with him, right? That's who the box is for. But I just think the demographic who comes out for that will be definitely way less than the people who are currently on Xbox. But going back to Satya's statement, sorry, the air is going to continue to be let out of the hardware balloon until that flattens out into a business that is oriented around putting software on every platform and its subscription service. And at the end of the day, I guess, I mean, when you do the linear math of taking what Xbox had historically been making and combining it with what Activision had historically been making, you got to a point where your revenue outlook was relatively at parity with PlayStation. But I think based on these decreasing numbers, when you chop off of that, the hardware business, right, or a big chunk of it, I guess you're getting to a business that's less than a $30 billion gaming business, which is fine. But again, the whole notion, right, of the pundits was that buying Activision was going to bring them to parity, where it was going to level the playing field between them and PlayStation. Now, granted, I think PlayStation will be less than a $30 billion business, like it has been, like in the last year or two. So I don't know exactly where that's going to be where that's going to flatten out, but it seems like, at least for the time being, or for a cycle or whatever, until they get to even keel, the Xbox business seems like it's going to be coming in as less than a $30 billion, $29 billion business.
Yeah, let me grab the super chat here. Everborn with another $5 super chat. Thank you again, Everborn. Says also guidance for the upcoming quarter has CNS as well as overall revenue up mid-single digits. I think it's a bit premature to pronounce it a failure.
So I'll take this one just really quickly, because this was an accusation that also got leveled at me when I was on GCP. I don't think I actually, quite honestly, David, while you were talking, I was off researching something. I don't know if David said it, but I'll go back again. I have not said that it's a failure. I've said that it'll maybe be less than a $30 billion business. I said that it's not meeting the somewhat wild claims that I think some people in the Xbox fan base made. No one said it's a failure. What we said is it's less market share than PlayStation. It may be less than they were originally looking at. Nobody said it's a failure. I think Xbox is a great business to have. I've constantly said we will all be better. We will all be worse off if we go down to a 2-console market. Nobody wants that. Xbox needs to stay in the business. Xbox is transforming, and most of my pushback is against people who make wild claims about where Xbox is heading. What I'm hoping is, and I've always said, Xbox, again, yes, lowest install base, right, but always second in revenue, ahead of Nintendo. So all I hope is that continues. I just hope that we can get away from the discussions that make wild prognostications that are nowhere near reality, and just let these businesses be what they are. Let them focus on the things that are their core competencies, and have discussions about them that are grounded in reality, right, and founded in objective and evidentiary fact.
So I don't disagree with that at all. The only piece that I was going to add to that was, and
I did think you used the word failure, though, Falky.
It's not looking good, but that's I'm looking at it from a pure business sense. And again, considering who is now in charge of ops, sitting above Phil, and where Xbox sits in the totem pole, like almost at the bottom now, the expenditures, it's not positive. But Xbox management continues to fail to meet their potential, and that's the most frustrating thing about it. They've got every thing in their arsenal at their disposal to be all conquering, and they keep shooting themselves in the foot. It's frustrating as hell. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get my thoughts together on this. The issue around, as Everborn said, and I don't disagree to a point, but the problem is, if gaming and service, if Xbox subscription and service revenue is 10 to 15% of the total gaming revenue, and it's only going to go up by mid percentages, they just had a massive loss in the baseline of that point. The loss in gaming revenue alone is outstripping any gains that they were making in the service and subscription point. It's going backwards. It can't afford to go backwards in its revenue growth if they're switching it to profitability, because the only other solution to that is you start carving out expenditure. And if you think dropping 2,000 people was a big hit, they'll have to drop 40-something% of their current staffing levels just to get back to on par and business break-even point in Xbox. What's that going to do to their studios? What's that going to do to their output? The amount of IP that they've got, and they're not going to get anywhere near it. They'll have to start licensing shit out. The amount of second-party deals will be phenomenal. And if they surrender their platform, then third party is non-existent anymore for them. They are then genuinely only doing whatever it is they're doing. internally. They won't have a third-party platform. Game Pass will be void of anything other than small indies that are doing publishing deals. If failure is too strong a word, I don't know what other word you would use. Disappointment, clusterfuck. I don't know. Call it whatever you want to, but it's not meeting its potential means it has failed to live up to the hype. And again, if they have to take a goodwill write-down on this deal, that's, in the eyes of any investor, that is a failed deal, and it will demand heads roll, and a lot of heads roll. So, if you think the wording's too strong, fair enough, but that's the perspective from a financial point of view.
I mean, where I will agree with Falky, right? I haven't used like specifically the label failure, but what I will say is, I totally agree that my assessment for a very long time has been, that Xbox division has been given all the tools that it should have needed to have garnered greater market share and be in more of a fight with PlayStation than they are today. We've been asked the question, what did you expect out of this generation, out of, given where they were with Xbox One? And as I've mentioned, and BRAP has concurred, what I expected out of this generation is that it was going to be a fight. I didn't expect it was going to be a Formula One race, right? And by that, Falky knows what I mean. In the so many Formula One races, the number one person gets way out ahead, and on the camera, on the BBC, Sky, whatever, right, you just see the number one car like out by themselves, right? The fights are for second, third, fourth, and fifth. I didn't expect that's what we were going to get this generation. I have talked many times about how Phil has been promoted, right, from general manager of the Xbox brand to president of the unit to now he's a C-level officer, right? And like sometimes I don't get it. And where I will also agree with Falky is I wouldn't use the term failure, but in terms of your typical metrics, and this is where Falky is definitely speaking from, like your typical metrics by which we assess success and failure from a financial perspective, by most metrics at most other corporations, a lot of this would be looked at as a failure. And like I said, I haven't used the term failure, but what I will definitely say is it has often defied reality for me. Like it's defied explainability as to like why you would keep going down this path, why would you continue making investment, why you would take $70 billion out of your $117 billion cash on hand and throw it behind a division that is in such a tail chase from a competitive market share perspective. And again, I don't have to understand it, right? But I just don't get it, because in every other case study I've seen, like that's not the choice most companies have made that have come out of the case study as successes.
Yeah,
the ones that are failures have it.
To your point, Logic. You go ahead, Foggy.
They don't have that much cash on hand anymore. They've got 17 billion, and their cash flow statement is indicating that if they want to do this heavy investment in AI, Azure, and intelligent cloud that they're talking they need to do, they're actually going to have to borrow or stop or lean heavily on equity to do that, because they are cash neutral at the moment as a broader organization. There is no money left to spend in gaming to make it grow. There is no money left to spend in gaming to subsidize Game Pass, to subsidize getting third-party games in the Game Pass, to subsidize any of that crap. And they've got this issue of third parties now not coming to the platform for key market areas that they need to grow in, i.e. China. So, don't think that Microsoft has got big pockets left. The wallet is closed for a reason.
Well, and to elevate a little bit out of gaming, like again, going back to like the parts of that like defy logic to me, it's like the investment needed for AI, right? In the plays that they're trying to make. And again, they're a multi-trillion-dollar company. They're in the club of six. I'm sure they're going to figure this out. I'm sure Dieback Hape is going to be a big part of that. But like the investment needed to be made in AI isn't just building out more data centers. It's building out more data centers. It's having to do things like buy small nuclear plants, right? Or make heavy investments and heavy deals for energy. And they've hooked themselves to Intel, right?
Yeah.
For their future AI chip, when Intel is like barely a going concern these days, right?
Yeah.
Is struggling. And so, like, I mean, I feel like that's going to have to be a pivot shift. I mean, they're probably going to have to go back to Jensen, right, and get back on his board. So I don't know. It's just, it's a thing. Like I said, I don't have to understand it, but I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Logic. Like I was surprised by the investment of by what's really been a division within Microsoft that for a while hasn't been performing well. And considering the investments and the emphasis of AI, Azure, that they didn't take that $70 billion and invest in those areas. In particular, AI now, considering how competitive the AI space has become, right? So I don't disagree with your point there, Logic. Like to your point, like it doesn't make sense, it makes sense for them, and they felt like in this case the juice was worth the squeeze. But for me, looking like outside looking in, it never really made that much sense to me, given the performance of the market and given the markets we talked about. And I know you mentioned this, like we all thought Microsoft would be in a much better position with the value proposition of Game Pass, Xbox Series S, the Xbox Series X. We talked about this last week. Now we see the Xbox Series consoles are trailing behind Xbox One, which is a disastrous console generation for them. So yeah. I guess the end game for them here is, we see Forza Horizon going to PlayStation 5 now, maybe offset some of this expenditure and like, the rents do, that nuts do. Like I said to you earlier today, Logic, like that we got to pay that nut. More games on other platforms. And now it's also rumored that Forza Horizon 5 is going to be on the Nintendo Switch too. And I can tell you, I've heard Halo end of the year, Master Chief Collection, Gears next year. I mean, everything's coming multi-plat for them, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's the direction they're choosing to go because they need to sell software.
At what point? Let me put it this way, and I'm a little bit hung up on this, but I'm going to carry this for a little bit. At what point do you say it was not successful? And if it's not successful, what is it?
I mean, so there are comments in the chat, and I can't. Normally, I emphasize, particularly with our chat, other watchers of the show, that I try to be very hyper specific about, like when I'm talking about analysis versus speculation versus hopes and dreams, or what I want as a gamer. And I can't do that in this case because I don't necessarily know which voice I'm channeling. I think there is a good chance that they find that equilibrium, right? And I'm not sure. I'm hoping, I guess, that the mixture of getting to a boutique hardware business where they're not wrapped around the axle about its profitability or market share. So if they do something that's analogous to Surface, right, combined with leaning heavily into the software space and doing the exact thing that BRAP talked about, right, which is like, look, at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to expend $100 billion to build a game to sell to 35 million people. Right, that math doesn't math. And so what I'm hoping to see, quite honestly, in terms of survivability, right, because at the end of the day, what I want is, like I said, I want 3 console manufacturers in the space, even if Microsoft is just making a small amount of hardware. Like, I want 3 console-centric suppliers in the space, because I think that is the thing that we need as gamers to have a healthy, viable capital market. So I'm hoping they get to the boutique business, that they sell their software. I am hoping that they just bite the bullet and stop dorking around and just say it's day and date, everything, everywhere. Right? Because now at this point, you don't care. Nobody cares about whether or not anybody buys your box. So stop with that. Right? Just make your games, put them day and date everywhere. Right? And quite honestly, I'm at the point, don't report any financials out of the Xbox division because I don't care. Like, clearly the choices and decisions you make aren't based on what the normal KPIs and financial metrics are that most of the free thinking world goes by. So just stop reporting it. Like, if it doesn't matter to you, like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't need to know whether it's profitable or not. Like just stop. Get your games out, because what I will say I definitely want, regardless of whether or not it makes sense to me, is I'm looking forward to playing. What is it? Is it Doom: The Dark Ages?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing that. Right. I'm looking forward to the games that are coming down the pike. I'm looking forward to South of Midnight. I'm looking forward to what is it? Clockwork. Come on, BRAP. It's a bang.
No, you're talking about the game
Clockwork Revolution.
Clockwork, yeah, thank you.
I'm looking forward to that. I am looking forward to. Look, I've said that what you need to have in place in order to make this business go is you've got to take these 23 to 28 studios that you have now. You've got to get the production pipeline ironed out. You're trying to feed the subscription service. You got to get to a point, regardless of what all the marketing and PR and like tomfoolery has been. You have to get to a point where you've got a big game showing up in that service once every quarter. Yes, I know that they've tried to backpedal out of that. I know Matt Booty has gone to say, I forget what was the last thing he said. We're going to do 10 releases per year. I've stopped trying to count that because so many times I count it and I don't get to 10, or I get to 10, and even out of the 10, there's like 3 that I really care about. Like some of them are so small and blips on the radar that I wouldn't even count them because they're like indie titles, and I'm like, that doesn't justify somebody's Game Pass subscription, whatever. Just get to 4 big games per year, right? And in order to do that, you've got to have backups. You're going to have to get to a point where you have the production pipeline so full that you have games that you are holding back releasing because you don't need them. But you have to have them prepped and on standby because some of your studios are going to get delays. Some of them are going to have misses. Some of them are going to have like last minute cancellations or a hardware problem or whatever. So you've actually got to have like 6 rounds in the barrel, right? And I think they're getting there. I mean, supposedly they were kind of there with Avowed, although I don't necessarily know that the market was so saturated that it didn't make sense for them to release Avowed. I think they had Indiana Jones coming out, and so they didn't need to put Avowed out because Avowed wasn't going to compete on the market, right, with some of the things that were coming out, or at least there was increased risk, like in that fourth quarter. So. I mean, I think they're getting there. I just want them to publish games because they do make some games that I'm interested in. And I just want to have less of the propaganda coming out. I want to start hearing and seeing less of the GLT. Greatest thing about the developer direct, none of the GLT showed up. That's a perfect show. You don't need to see any of the 3 of them.
I will say this, like, to their credit, I mean, I think and I've always thought, like, with the value prop of Game Pass, like I think they. And again, I mean, I think there's some. I think for them, maybe the challenge is maybe spacing games because like April, May is loaded for Game Pass, right? And there's probably like 3 games that are going to Game Pass. I'm like, oh, I would play all 3 of these games. How do I manage that, right?
I actually screwed that up last week, BRAP, and I don't know if I corrected that. I was so fixated on what was in the developer direct that I totally forgot because I was like, well, this lineup is great, but you've got nothing for Q1. But I completely forgot that Avowed is coming out in February.
Yeah, Avowed in February. Yeah. So, I mean, they have Avowed in April, May. I mean, they have a good cadence. I guess, and this is probably me overthinking a bit because I guess as a gamer, I could push those games out, even though I don't want to because I want to experience those games day and day when they release. As we often talk about gamers, we want to be part of the experience, the conversation. But I hope they can maintain this release cadence, at least in Game Pass. Because for me, like, I'm like, look, if you want me in Game Pass, I'm not going to give you a year of BRAP money. I want to see what you guys have in that pipeline, and then I'll give you a year of BRAP money if it makes sense, right? I always said there's got to be 4 games that equal the value of the year for Game. At the very minute, I got to break even on Game Pass for it to make sense for me. So I think that I know Booty's talking about 10 games, and that hasn't been the case, but I do think that cadence of releases has improved, at least for this year. We'll see if they continue that next year. I hope they do, given the amount of, I mean, they, like you like to say, they went bonga hamp with studios, with the acquisition of studios. They have like 28 studios. I would imagine that they would be able to, keep that gate, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope they do. As a gamer, I hope they do.
They got to be working on something. Like,
I'm sure they
amount
are.
of expenditure it's costing them to have those studios and have minimal output on it. Like, their first party output has been similar to PlayStation's output, and PlayStation's output is appalling, but it's always been small. Like the first party arrangements there, like Anyway, I've got to just interject. I got to head off. I've only just seen the time and been so engrossed in the conversation.
Yeah,
I
no,
completely lost track. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Falky.
for putting up. Thank you for putting up with my tirades. Apologies for any language if you get demonetized. Again, I do apologize. But yeah,
Falky,
thanks for having me.
I've by the way, I've been in meetings with bean counters that have literally made the faces you made when they're looking over financials and they're looking at budgets and they're like, guys, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? That face.
Ops managers make us go grey and crazy, mate. I tell you, it just
it
drives us to drinking. A true fact: accountants have the highest instance of alcoholism and the ones most likely to become psycho killers. That's the one profession that's the top thing, most prevalent: alcoholics and psycho killers. And you can see why. If you deal with us in boardrooms and meeting rooms and we walk in and we just, put something up on the screen or drop a piece of paper down and what the F is going on here?
Why is it so difficult
to follow this plan?
I don't like when the financial analysts join meetings. That's never a good thing.
Actually, side note, one of my favorite pastimes at work when I actually get 5 minutes is to put on my auditor vest and go wandering around in the workshops and the facilities.
Oh my God.
It just unnerves the shit out of people. It's fun.
You're just walking around kind of nodding your head.
Yeah. Got the little notepad and the tablet, and I just walk around and I just randomly ask, oh yeah, who are you and what do you do here? Okay, what's this thing? And how much is it worth? Does it get used very often?
How much does it cost? Yeah, exactly. How much does it cost to develop? And yeah,
it's always fun. It's always fun. Do you use that machine very often? How much do you think it's worth if we sold it? Yeah, it's always good fun. Anyway, thanks for having me. Thanks again for the chat. Really enjoyed it. Thanks to the chat. Enjoy the engagement. I'll leave you to it, but I'll chat to you again soon.
Thank you, Falky. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
All right, we do have another super chat. Thank you again, Everborn. Really appreciate the support. As always, says it pains me as a longtime Xbox fan to say this, but what if the thing that isn't working is the hardware business, and they, as Logic pointed out, moved to third-party publishing role with a boutique hardware offering?
I mean, I personally think that's a great format. No, now look, I will admit when I say that, I probably typically always drink the Xbox Kool-Aid on their strategic outings, where they're going. I've always said that it makes sense. And then I get bothered with like their execution. So maybe this is just me. Maybe this is just me doing the same thing that I accuse, hardcore Xbox fans of repeating the talking points right from the GLT. But yeah, I think that's fine. Look, Surface. I had a Microsoft Surface. I loved my Surface 7. I've turned the corner and become a Mac user, but the time that I was on Surface, it was great. I think that boutique offering. I think the big thing, and this is why I also say I don't know that I would be that bothered by them just stopping reporting any financials associated with Xbox, because like at that point it doesn't matter. Like the reason they did Surface is because they were trying to grab mind share away from Apple. Right? They wanted to show that, hey, Windows can do hardware too. They wanted to show that Microsoft could do hardware. They wanted to show that they could do something other than like a beige box equivalent of a laptop that was like a ThinkPad equivalent, and do something, arguably beautiful, right? Arguably that when you had it on your desk, you wanted to use it, right? Which is how I feel about my Macs, my MacBook Airs, my Mac Mini. When I come in and I see these things on the desk, I often make up excuses, right, to go use them. So I think that's fine. I don't need a hybrid box. I have lots of problems with a lot of the things that a lot of people have talked about it. Like I just having been around consumer electronics a lot and done a lot of reviews, like I would contend that any mode switching, like while a box is live, that basically does kind of like a soft reboot to kick into a different operating system, or like is always an inherently bad experience, particularly on top of Windows. This is another thing that bothers me about some of the things that are going around. It's this whole discussion of like an Xbox OS. I'm like, you guys do understand that's just Windows, right? Like it's just, they're just putting a different front end on it. The stuff all behind it, like all the way down to the kernel, is still Windows.
It's Windows,
you're not getting away from Windows. We do that all the time, right? I built machinery control systems that you use to light off propulsion engines and 33 megawatt generators. And
it's Windows.
It's just in front of Windows. So you're not saving yourself from that, right? Granted, there's some minification that goes on and some ripping out of some of the clunkier parts that you don't need, some non-essentials. But Xbox uses a lot of stuff in the Windows operating system, so I don't know that there's that much that gets ripped out that makes a huge wholesale difference. In particular, the best thing that you could do from a consumer perspective is just stop the freaking security updates, or at least its approach to updates, just in terms of how frequently they happen, how frequently it takes over your system, how frequently it does stuff in the background. But it's neither here nor there. I mean, but the key thing is that once you put yourself in that space where you're building that kind of hardware, you're no longer as concerned about profitability. You're no longer as concerned with comparisons, right? You are building something that is ostensibly vastly different than a PlayStation. And so there's no need to be worried about comparison. Dave Falke talked a little bit earlier, way earlier in the show, that, all of us have been or are in some, role of supervising people. And from being somebody who leads engineering teams, that's also a thing that unlocks creativity, right? And gives people the ability to go whiteboard concepts that they hadn't considered because there were always some constraints on what they could do. So, I think it's a good play. Do a handheld too, by the way. I'd say that's in the playbook. Lots of people have been very supportive of Microsoft hardware, right? It's just that at the end of the day, there's always some financial constraint put on it that the thing needs to compete. And then when it doesn't, then the rug gets pulled out from underneath that. But they didn't do that with Surface, right? Which is why Surface is still a viable line. It started taking away some of the freedom, and that's why Panos Panay left, right? But for a very long time, through 7, 8, 9, 10 iterations, right, of Surface, right, they were allowed to do what they wanted to do. So, I'm hoping it heads in that direction as well.
Yeah. Let me grab this. Not super chat. What is it? Lotus Esprit again gifts 5 members. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate the support as always. Look, Logic, that's all I have for topics today, sir. I don't know if there's anything you want to discuss before we wrap up.
I do want to get to just one thing that Innate is saying. Maybe this is a challenge, or maybe it's pushback. I don't know, but Innate has talked a lot about where the Xbox base is, and this is going to be a hard thing, and I think it's going to be a thing that lots of Xbox fans won't accept. Once you move into that business model, in my opinion, once you're focused more on the software side, you're focused more on being a publisher, you're putting out a thing that's boutique. The notion of where your base is and I think this will be the hardest corner for the GLT to turn. And this is why I personally think the whole everything is an Xbox doesn't work. First of all, it doesn't work because the people you're speaking to, in my opinion, are offended by it. I assure you, my Mac Mini and my MacBook Air and my iPad, all my Apple stuff that I paid lots of good money to Apple for is not an Xbox, right? I'm not investing that money in those pieces of hardware, right, because it's an Xbox. And I personally find it, as a consumer, offensive for you to try to tell me that. You try to tell me that it's an Xbox just because I'm using your software, because no one else is making that market play. No one else says that, that's a Netflix screen because you use Netflix. That's a Spotify player because you use Spotify. Again, it's one of those things that kind of defies logic to me. So, I don't know why you feel the need, right, to do that. I think you feel the need to do that because you're speaking to people that you're actually now not as worried about selling games to. You're really trying to sell games to the people who aren't on the Xbox hardware. None of us care about the notion of every screen being an Xbox. In fact, that incentivizes me less to use an Xbox product on those other screens. But I think my main thing is, and this is what I mean when I say this will be the hardest quarter for the GLT to turn. Most publishers don't have a brand-centric user base. Most gamers, PC gamers in particular, none of us refer to I'm the one exception. Most of us don't refer to ourselves as an Ubisoft fan base, right? No, very few people probably a few more people refer to themselves as part of a Rockstar fan base, right? But I talked about this a few weeks ago. as you get down the ladder in publishers, then publishers become smaller and smaller and smaller. I think you do get a little bit more of, there are people who say, I like Capcom games, right? Everborn, right, will say he likes Sega games, right? But it becomes less and less important. And overall, up and down that ladder, it becomes less and less important. People don't identify as being a part of a fan base, a loyalty fan base of a publisher. The few that do, I probably bet that they're on that publisher subscription system, right? They're on EA Play, right? They're on Ubisoft Plus.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of the market doesn't. So in my opinion, part of the thing that comes out of this and part of the things they need to unbuckle themselves from is this notion of pushing the existence of an Xbox fan base. You got to let it go, right? Like, you're looking at selling software, right? That's just not the way that other software vendors typically speak. And the reason you're carrying that baggage around is exactly because of that, because you have legacy baggage. But the customer base that you're trying to build now is ostensibly different than the customer base you rode in on. But you got to start speaking a language that makes sense. And a lot of that language is to not say as much as you have in the past. That's going to be the thing that's hard. And probably, I would even argue, is a transition that they won't make until they've moved beyond Phil Spencer. Because I think he's locked into that mode and he can't get out of it. And I'm hoping, what I think I might be seeing is that maybe Sarah Bond and Matt Booty are getting that. I think up until this point, they've been participating in that and maybe feeding on it. And now it feels like, especially after the last few times that Sarah Bond came out and she caught a lot of heat and smoke, right? Because she was the only person out there and Phil wasn't. I think she has become less interested in playing that game too, because we've seen heck of a lot less of her over the last few months.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great points, Logic. Great points. Anything else, Logic, before we wrap up?
No. I think I'm good.
Right,
There's one question. Are we saying rebrand? So I'm saying I don't know that I care that there's a brand, right? I mean, EA, Ubisoft, Rockstar. I don't know that I care about them as a tribe, right? And so I think that's the main thing I'm saying is whatever the new brand is, don't worry about it being a tribe, right? Unbuckle yourself from that legacy baggage.
Yeah. And I'm not even focused on, because I have moved on from Xbox hardware. And for me, the focus now is just, because of the amount of studios they have, I just want to see good games. And that's it. I'd love the developer showcase or developer direct. I thought it was great. Great. I mean, great games that are coming to Game Pass. That's what I want to see. That's all I care about now. I don't care. I don't look at them as a traditional, like in the traditional sense of a hardware manufacturer or like a Nintendo or Sony anymore, because I feel like they've pivoted away from that, or they're pivoting away from that. I mean, clearly they are. I mean, they're putting their games everywhere, literally everywhere now, which is fine. Like I know people like to argue that, they're doing it better, it's the future. I don't care. Like I think people, again, this goes back to what we said earlier in the show, what we've said on this show a million times, that companies have different objectives. You've said this, they have different KPIs, different OKRs, they have different risks, and they're going to do things that they feel like make sense for their business and their bottom line, right? And just because one company does it different doesn't mean the other company needs to follow suit. We don't have this conversation with any other consumer product, by the way. I know we don't. For some reason in gaming, we do. Drives me nuts. But just generally speaking, Xbox, if they can continue doing what they've done with it, like the last developer direct, and maybe it might not be as good every developer direct, but at least a good cadence of releases and some good games. I'm happy with that as a gamer.
Or even, and I'll even challenge the notion of a good cadence. Look, I make a big issue out of cadence because, like you said, right, because of the number of studios they have, and quite frankly, because they run their mouths about it, right? If they would just shut up, I probably wouldn't say anything about cadence, because you know what? My pushback challenge litmus test, even for you, BRAP, is to say, look, BRAP's favorite publisher is FromSoft. I don't know that BRAP gets wrapped around the axle about FromSoft's cadence. right? So it's like
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I really don't. I don't. I'm just joking. I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
don't.
from
I
Soft,
really
guess
don't.
what? Doesn't build a console. Doesn't worry. I mean, yes, they have a brand, but they also don't have somebody who's constantly out talking about, I'm not going to do what the other guy does.
Yeah, I mean, like we don't see what's his name? God, what's his name from Software? I forget his name. Is it Itagaki? No, that's not Itagaki. That's the guy from Gaiden. What the hell's his name now? Because I'm getting old, I forget. The guy from Software.
I don't know, man. You're the From Software stan.
I'm sure Nate knows. And Nate, what's the guy's name from Software? God, I can't believe it. How am I forgetting his name? God, if Erica's listening,
Miyazaki.
Miyazaki. Yeah,
he's the director and president.
Yeah, like Miyazaki's not always center stage, talking about From Software. So, I don't. Yeah, and the thing is, like, and if From Software's not releasing games, I go elsewhere. I go to, whatever Ubisoft's releasing or whatever the other publishers releasing or studio, whatever the case is. So
my only other thing is about something that you said, and I think something else I saw there, like the developer direct. It wasn't you. I think it was a journalist or something. My only pushback is, okay, sure, maybe probably great show, right? But then I saw somebody say, "Oh yeah, this is like it's innovative. It's like the first time." I'm like, "Have you Ubisoft would like to have a word." That is the Ubisoft formula, and that's why I've said for a decade, like the highlight of E3 and the thing I look forward to most was the Ubisoft show, because they bring the creative directors out, they tell you about the game, they tell you why they're building the game, and then they give you like a chunk of gameplay, like not a cinematic trailer, right? For some of their games that are further out in pipeline, they give you that, but like the games that are right in the windshield, like it's a ton of gameplay. Like it's gameplay with an introductory monologue, again from the creative director typically. And then like anywhere from 50 minutes to a longer period, 15 minutes to like a longer period of gameplay. So I always like the Ubisoft structure. I don't need it always to start with Dance Dance Revolution, but even that I accept. I acknowledge that that's an Ubisoft stick. They also had a year where like everybody came out and was like way overhyped. It was like a big showmanship thing. I was like, like guys, we don't need that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank first. I want to thank everyone in the live chat for joining us tonight. I really appreciate the super chats tonight, and the gifted BRAP memberships as well. Thank you, and also want to thank our guest Doomsayer and Falky as well. And I also want to give a big thank you, as always, to Game Logic. Logic, I ask you this every week, but if you want to be found, let everyone know where they can find you.
If you guys want to catch up with me, you can catch up with me on the Enough to Keep Going weekly video games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, Sunday nights at 8 p.m. I also hear that at some point I'm supposed to be a guest on this thing called the Otter podcast or something like that. I don't know. Nate can tell you more about that.
All right. So you're going to be the guest of the Otter podcast every day. That's awesome.
That's what I heard. Rumor has it.
Oh, rumor has it. So it hasn't been confirmed just yet. It's just rumor.
Yeah. I'll let Nate make that confirmation.
All right. Well, again, everyone in the live chat, thank you so much. And please do that YouTube thing. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notification, do the YouTube stuff. And we'll be back next Friday at 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern time. I'm not sure. It's either going to be 8 or 9, but we'll be back next week discussing the latest in video game news, analysis, and games that we're playing. And everyone have a great weekend, by the way, and enjoy playing video games, because ultimately that's what it's all about. Until next time, have a great one. We'll see you then. Bye.